Chapter 1666. After drinking a cup of tea, the fragrance lingered in her teeth and cheeks, and she felt relaxed. Arbor only felt that her body was warm and cozy, and she could no longer feel the burning sensation from the fire. It was as if her entire body was soaking in a hot spring, extremely comfortable. Ball, pour me another cup. Is this brewed with spirit tea leaves that are half a tail and a fun? Yes, Masta. Masta's measurement of medicinal herbs was extremely accurate. Naturally, she could accurately tell the amount of spirit tea in one cup. A green vine took the teacup back to Paradise Planet, and within a second, handed another cup of steaming hot spirit tea to Arbor. After drinking another cup of spirit tea, Arbor felt that the mystic energy in her body, that had been depleted, had completely returned. After drinking the third cup, Arbor could feel a trace of spirit energy, circulating slightly in her meridians, slowly flowing through her body. Under the mystic energy in her body, this bit of spirit energy was like a clay ox entering the sea, immediately sinking and disappearing without a trace. However, this could not be denied. If this spirit tea was drunk over a long period of time, it would naturally imperceptibly change the meridians in her body, helping her to shape her spirit meridians, and increasing the spirit energy in her body. When the tea was brewed for the fourth time, the effects were slightly less effective. After drinking 7 cups of water in a row, Arbor felt that the spirit tea in her cup was no different from ordinary tea leaves. However, when ordinary tea leaves were brewed for the 7th time, they were basically so bland that they could not taste anything. Arbor put down the teacup, only feeling that her physical strength had recovered to an extremely optimal state. Even if 3 spirit beasts ran over right now, she could still beat them 3 times in a row. Ball, brew another 4 people's worth of tea. She wanted to treat her teammates to tea. Ball nagged. This tea is too expensive. Right now it's only enough for 500 people. The more you drink, the less you get. Moreover, with their weak bodies, how can they endure this spirit tea? Although it nagged incessantly, Ball still ran off to brew the tea. Not long after, it told her that the tea was ready. Arbor turned a deaf ear to Ball's nagging. Thus, she excitedly got up and ran over to wake up her teammates one by one with great interest. Duamuqing was not in a deep sleep. When he felt someone walk to his side, his eyes suddenly opened. Arbor was hesitating whether or not he should reach out to push him, when he suddenly saw him open his eyes. He subconsciously took a step back and looked away guiltily. He coughed lightly and said, Since you're awake, get up and drink some tea." The little fatty raised his hand and yawned. His eyes were hazy as he said, "Jojo, I thought some profound beast would attack us in the middle of the night. What's wrong with this kid? Waking them up in the middle of the night for tea? Why are you drinking tea? I want to sleep." Qi Xianxian sat there with her head drooping. She felt that her entire body was drenched in sweat. Her entire body felt sticky and uncomfortable. "Come, have some tea." Arbor handed cups of tea to the 5 of them. "Drink up." Unable to refuse such hospitality, the 4 of them picked up their teacups and drank. After sleeping for most of the night, he indeed felt very thirsty. This cup of tea came at the right time. After drinking a cup of tea, the 4 of them widened their eyes. It was as if the little fatty's soul had returned to him. He stuttered, "Jojo, this tea? How strange. Where did Jojo get the tea in the middle of the night? It was still fucking hot. How do you feel?" Arbor wanted to know if the effects of the spirit tea they drank were the same as hers. Chapter 1667. This feeling is too good. Little fatty slapped his thigh, feeling his spirit lift. "I feel as comfortable as if I'm soaking in spring water. Suddenly, I don't feel the scorching heat anymore." Qi Xuanxuan's eyes lit up. She felt that the sticky and smelly sweat all over her body seemed to have disappeared. Even though she was sitting on top of the lava mountain range, she could still feel the cool and refreshing night breeze. Right, what kind of tea is this? It's too magical. What's up with the 36,000 small pores all over her body, and the comfortable feeling? Arbor took out a teapot and filled the teacups in front of the 4 of them. Another cup. The 4 of them hurriedly reached for the cups. They didn't care about talking anymore, nor did they care about whether it was hot or not. Like cows drinking water, they gulped down another cup. How do you feel? Arbor asked again. I feel that my whole body is filled with profound energy. The profound energy that was consumed earlier has all been recovered. Little Fatty stuttered, his eyes filled with disbelief. This was too fast. Even the profound recovery elixir wasn't this effective. The profound recovery elixir that was sold on the market could only recover 1/10 of one's profound energy. And this ordinary cup of tea, actually soothed the profound energy in their bodies by 100%. My God, what kind of tea is this? While holding a small notebook and brush, Xiaomu earnestly recorded down the effects of the medicine. In other words, the first cup of this spiritual tea could open up the human body's limbs, bones, and meridians, making you feel as if you were bathing in a hot spring. The second cup would restore your whole body's strength. The third cup's effect was to inject a little spiritual energy into the body. After drinking it, the effect wouldn't be too great. Arbor kept the notebook and looked at the four dumbfounded people. The fourth cup's effect isn't too great. Do you still want to drink it? What a joke. If they still didn't know that this tea was extraordinary, then they would definitely be fools. With such good tea, how could they not drink it? Moreover, Jojo only said that the effect wasn't great. He didn't say that it was completely ineffective. Of course they couldn't waste it. Seeing the four of them nod their heads in unison, Arbor refilled their glasses. Just like her, he drank 7 cups of water in a row. His stomach was probably filled with tea. Arbor waved his hand and said, "Go to sleep." What was laughable was that the 5 of them seemed to have been injected with chicken blood and were in high spirits. How could they still sleep? After tossing and turning for a while, Arbor suddenly got up from the rock. The other 4 also sat up and looked at her speechlessly. Ahem. Arbor coughed lightly with an indifferent expression. Why don't we scatter some powder now and provoke some spirit beasts to fight? Good idea. Qi Xianxian immediately agreed. Now that her eyes were clear and her mind was clear, she did not feel sleepy at all. It was useless to just lie there and roll around. She might as well get some spiritual beasts to continue with the mission, but seeing that the 4 of them had no objections. Arbor took out a porcelain bottle, filled with medicinal powder from his pocket, and sprinkled it. It was an exciting night. In the middle of the night, the entire lava mountain range was restless. Many beasts ran towards Arbor and the others. The shadows of the mystic beasts galloping in the forest affected Fairy Yellow Crane, Che Rumen, and the others. They had no idea what was going on. They only knew that the mystic beasts in the entire lava mountain range were very busy tonight. Chapter 1668. At the first glimmer of dawn, the 5 people harvested 3 more spirit beast corpses. Arbor stuffed them into his storage talisman. After a night of torment, the 5 people were a bit exhausted, but thankfully, they had a decent harvest. Looking at this mission, they basically completed 70% or so. Mata was incredibly happy. He flipped the spirit beast meat on the grill with one hand and said with a smile, "Oh my God, I never knew that the entrance test could be played like this. Compared to our entrance test this time, TSK, my entrance test back then was filled with trials and tribulations, and was extremely bitter." The other 4 people were currently sitting around the grill with their eyes closed to recover the mystic energy in their bodies. Sweat trickled down their foreheads. The spiritual tea had been consumed in their bodies for an entire night, and had already been completely consumed. They once again felt the unbearable scorching heat in their surroundings. But no one asked Arbor about last night's spiritual tea, nor did anyone ask Arbor for that spiritual tea to drink. Arbor inwardly felt that although these teammates of his looked silly, they were actually quite reliable. After drinking the spiritual tea, and going through an entire night of fierce fighting, everyone felt that their cultivation had improved slightly. Qi Xianxian also sensed that the barrier to her peak level 13 mystic cultivation was already on the verge of breaking. She opened her eyes joyfully and said, I think I'm about to advance." The little stoic also opened her eyes when she heard this, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She took out a mystic breakthrough pill and handed it to her. "Eat it. I'll guard you. Advance." She only said a few words, but it made Qi Xianxian feel extremely moved. Qi Xianxian nodded at her, but didn't say any words of gratitude. She only took the mystic breakthrough pill and consumed it without hesitation. Then she closed her eyes again and blocked her 5 senses, entering a vacuum cultivation mode to advance. Soon, Xiaomu clearly saw waves of mystic energy drifting over from above the stone forest. Mystic energy from all directions was swarming into Qi Xuanxuan's body. Instructor Wei Wei, who was sitting quietly on a huge rock in the lava mountain range, suddenly opened his eyes. He raised his head to look at the restless profound energy on the mountain range, and muttered to himself, "Someone actually advanced in the lava mountain range?" Wei Wei closed his eyes again, ignoring everything around him. In the other room, Fairy Yellow Crane looked at her teammates with a pale face and said, "Let's leave the lava mountain range now. Last night was really lively. All the Xian beasts in the entire lava mountain range have heard the news, haven't they?" They couldn't sleep well that night. Originally, she had already obtained 3 Fire Viper's gallbladders yesterday. After completing the mission, she could immediately leave the lava mountains. However, it was already late at night, and it wasn't safe to walk in the lava mountain range at night. Therefore, Fairy Yellow Crane decided that everyone would endure for one more night. After resting enough, they would set off the next morning. In the end, things didn't go as planned. That night, let alone rest, Fairy Yellow Crane and the others were all on tenterhooks, not daring to close their eyes. They were worried that those mischievous mystic beasts would be blind and surround them at some point. After spending a deceptive night, when everyone was resolutely planning to leave, Fairy Yellow Crane also discovered that mystic energy from all directions was gathering in one place in the sky above the mountain range. Chapter 1669. Fairy Yellow Crane glanced over in shock and muttered to herself, "Someone actually advanced in such a harsh environment." Then, she did not pay any more attention to it, and led the team back to where they came from. Wait! A weak voice came from beside her, causing Fairy Yellow Crane to stop in her tracks. Fairy Yellow Crane turned her head and saw Che Rumen, who looked exhausted. She was half lying in Li Qian's arms and waving at her. "Friend, can you sell us some water?" After a series of fierce battles, not only did Che Rumen feel exhausted, but she could not even lift her hands. Even the feeling of longing for water was driving her crazy. She wanted to drink water, now was the time. However, all of the teammates in the team had also drunk all the water on them during the fierce battle. In the process of fighting with the mystical beasts, they had consumed a lot of their physical strength. Only by constantly replenishing their water could they barely support themselves from falling to the ground. Although they persevered in the end, they ran out of water on the second day of the test. This made them feel very confused. After all, the mission given to their team by the instructor was to kill 10 spirit beasts of level 1 and above. In the army of mystical beasts they encountered yesterday, they basically did not see any spirit beasts. Even if there were, who would have the energy to specifically capture spirit beasts when they were about to lose their lives? Fairy Yellow Crane was a woman with a good temperament. Seeing Che Rumen's situation, she could not help but feel a trace of sympathy. She raised her hand and took out the only 2 jugs of water in her inner world. She handed them to Che Rumen and said, "The dozen or so jugs of water I brought in are almost all used up. Take these 2 jugs, but I see that your situation is very bad. If possible, you might as well leave with us and go to a nearby village to replenish your supplies first. There are no villages within 100 kilometers of here. The closest to the lava mountain range is Anka City. Then let's go to Anka City." "No." Che Rumen bit her lip and shook her head. "Our team's mission is not complete yet. Can you ask your team members to bring us a few jugs of water? You're leaving the lava mountain range anyway, so you should be able to reach Anka City by tonight at the latest." Fairy Yellow Crane looked back at her team members behind her with some difficulty. Some members were cautious and lowered their heads to avoid meeting Fairy Yellow Crane's gaze. That was a clear rejection. Fairy Yellow Crane naturally did not want to force her team members. After all, they had yet to leave the lava mountain range. In this special environment they were not completely safe. Only 2 members, seeing that Fairy Yellow Crane was in a difficult position, stood up and handed 2 jugs of water to Che Rumen. Che Rumen was somewhat dissatisfied. Fairy Yellow Crane's group of more than 10 people only gave them 6 jugs of water. This was too stingy. However, there was nothing she could do. She could only watch as Fairy Yellow Crane's group left. Che Rumen turned her head and looked at Li Qian, who was breathing heavily. Li Qian, you promised that you would get first place in this competition. Li Qian's eyes flashed with impatience. Who knew that the environment of this lava mountain range would be so harsh? The two of them were about to quarrel again. On the other hand, the level 13 mystic cultivator, who joined last, advised with a vulgar smile. It's not impossible to take first place. Chapter 1670. Che Rumen turned to look at him. That wretched man with the protruding mouth and monkey-like cheeks chuckled again. Miss Che, do you still remember the mission that the instructor assigned to that team from Arbor? Che Rumen was taken aback, but soon after, her expression turned joyous. You mean, we will find Xiao Mu's team and stealthily follow behind them, waiting for an opportunity to steal the cores of the spirit beasts they killed? The wretched man stroked his short beard and chuckled mischievously. This is a low-level method. How many spirit beasts can we steal from them? If they become vigilant, with the strength of their team members, we absolutely won't have a good time in their hands. Then what good idea do you have? The wretched man took out a talisman shining with a faint blue light from his pocket. Miss Che, please take a look. This is a yellow-level puppet talisman. Secretly stick it on that little girl, and I guarantee that she'll be obedient for 7 days. The wretched man chuckled mischievously again. Che Rumen and the others were slightly startled. The level 14 mystic cultivator in the team, Zhu Bozong, couldn't help but frown. Why do you have such a dirty thing like a talisman? People like talisman masters were loathsome existences no matter where they were. Their minds were too dark and terrifying, and they often hid in the dark to give people a fatal blow. The people they plotted against were still so foolish that they couldn't tell what was going on. The wretched man chuckled. You don't need to worry about that. In any case, I have my own channels. Just say if everyone wants to do it or not. I'm telling you, this talisman of mine has a great origin. The great master who made the talisman has a much higher cultivation than that little girl's surname Qiao, so he can definitely make her fall for it without anyone noticing. Heh. After speaking, he took out another talisman from his pocket. This is an invisibility talisman. I bought it in the black market by chance. If not for Fairy Huang He's reminder, I would have forgotten about the invisibility talisman. The wretched man glanced at Li Qian. How about it, young Master Li? Do you want to do it? Do you dare to do it? You want me to put on an invisibility charm, sneak up on Arbor, and use this puppet charm on her? Li Qian immediately understood. Of course, among all of us, your cultivation is the highest, and your movements are the most agile. Young Master Li is the most suitable person to do this. Che Rumen gritted her teeth. Li Qian, let's do it this way. Li Qian couldn't help but frown, but he still couldn't go against Che Rumen's intentions. Will your invisibility talisman be discovered by others? After all, there was a level 3 spirit master in their team. The wretched man's eyes flashed slightly, and he immediately laughed. How is that possible? The invisibility talisman was absolutely invincible for a quarter of an hour. Don't worry, the talisman master who made this talisman is definitely not a level 3 spirit master. You definitely won't be exposed in front of Arbor's team. When he said this, it made people feel uneasy. Li Qian frowned. Unable to resist Che Rumen's pleading gaze, he decided to take the risk and give it a try. Where can we find Arbor's team? The wretched man's eyes flashed, and he laughed mischievously. Too simple. We'll follow the mystic energy from the 4 directions cloud movement, and we'll naturally find that Miss Qiao. Che Rumen was startled, and she couldn't help but ask in surprise. You mean the advancement movement is caused by her? The wretched man shrugged. Perhaps. Chapter 1671. Following the direction of the surge of mystic energy, Che Rumen and the others indeed found traces of Arbor's group of 5. Che Rumen couldn't help but glance at that vulgar man. Who exactly was this person? Why was he so sure that someone from Arbor's team had advanced? Although it wasn't that loathsome Miss Qiao who had advanced, If someone from Arbor's team had advanced, it meant that their team's strength had improved yet again. This wasn't a good thing that was worth praising. I'll go now. Li Qian lowered his voice and asked. The vulgar man grabbed him. Young Master Li, let's make things clear first. I'll help your team get first place in this competition. After the competition ends, I'll deal with Miss Qiao. Li Qian couldn't help but be startled. What do you mean? We're all in the same boat. How could young Master Li not understand? The vulgar man revealed his black teeth and snickered at Li Qian. Li Qian immediately understood. But he looked down on the vulgar man in front of him. I didn't expect this brother to like this type. That Miss Qiao looked like she hadn't reached marriageable age. She was too young. Although she was very beautiful, her entire person was as cold as a jade carving. Li Qian didn't like this. The vulgar man chuckled. Go. Li Qian stuck the invisibility talisman on himself and felt a strange force enter his body. Immediately, he heard Che Rumen exclaim in a low voice. Li Qian disappeared. Li Qian couldn't help but feel more confident. He left Che Rumen and the others' hiding place and walked briskly towards Arbor's group of 5. Arbor should be guarding Qi Xianxian. Senior brother Mata was sitting at the side, flipping the barbecued meat on the rack. In the team, other than Qi Xianxian who was advancing with her eyes closed, the other 2, Little Fatty and senior brother Duan Muqing, were also meditating with their eyes closed. Li Qian exclaimed in a low voice. The heavens were helping him. He was originally worried that if senior brother Duan Muqing was awake, things would be difficult. He didn't expect that only senior brother Arbor and senior brother Mata were guarding. If this was the case, the success rate would be higher. As long as he stealthily snuck to Qiao Mu's side, and as the vulgar man said, stuck that puppet curse onto her without anyone noticing, the powerful curse's power would enter her conscious and immediately take control of her movements. At that time for 7 days, she would have no choice but to obey orders. Of course, the control of Qiao Mu, this little puppet, would most likely still fall into the vulgar man's hands. That was because the wretched man had never told him how to use the puppet charm. Li Qian silently arrived in front of Qiao Mu, but his body suddenly stiffened. This was because he noticed that Miss Qiao had raised her head and was looking at him coldly and mercilessly. Immediately, cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Why did it feel like this line of sight was substantial and had such penetrating power? Li Qian suddenly picked up a small grain of sand and flicked it at Arbor's feet. The sudden movement of the small gravel caused Mata, who was on the side, to swiftly look around vigilantly. After discovering that there were no suspicious humans or beasts in the surroundings, he raised a piece of spiritual beast meat and said to Qiao Qiao with a chuckle, Qiao Qiao, this spiritual beast meat is ready to eat. Do you want a piece first? You eat. Arbor glanced coldly at Li Qian, then closed her eyes. Li Qian heaved a sigh of relief. Damn, he thought Xiao Qing saw him. So he was overthinking. Chapter 1672. However, was he really thinking too much? Li Qian thought that he had silently sneaked forward, and that Arbor had not noticed him at all. When he reached into his pocket and took out the puppet amulet, he then saw Qiao Mu coldly glare at him. That gaze was clearly her gaze was focused on his face. Shit, she could actually see him? Li Qian cursed the wretched man in his heart. His pupils constricted. He was about to dodge to the side and retreat. Arbor raised her hand, and a light screen suddenly covered Li Qian's body. Li Qian was trapped in an inverted transparent cover, and his expression changed slightly. Arbor looked at him without a trace of pity in her eyes. There was only a deep chill. The moment the defensive lightning cover opened, hundreds of lightning bolts intertwined towards Li Qian's head. Trapped in the small defensive lightning cover, Li Qian could only cover his head and flee like a rat, constantly dodging the lightning bolts in the defensive lightning cover. At this moment, Che Rumen and the others who were hiding behind the rock were also stunned. What's going on? Che Rumen turned to look at the vulgar man. Didn't you say that no one would discover Li Qian within 15 minutes? What was the situation now? Was Li Qian being controlled by some spirit weapon? Li Qian was a level 1 spirit master, and was so flustered in this transparent cover. It could be seen that this spirit weapon was not ordinary. At this moment, Mata, who was worrying about the lack of salt on the barbecued meat, also jumped up from the ground and looked at the figure that appeared in the defensive lightning cover in shock. There was clearly no one there just now. This guy used an invisibility amulet and thought that no one could see him. Arbor said coldly, "Idiot. The person who made this invisibility amulet had a higher cultivation level than her. But so what? In order to protect Qi Xianxian, she had been vigilantly using her spiritual eye to scan the surroundings. Under her spiritual eye, this person had nowhere to hide. Moreover, as a yellow rank great talisman master, even with his eyes closed, he was able to sense the flow of talisman power in the air. Even if her cultivation was inferior to the other parties, talisman energy couldn't deceive people. This person was like a fool, openly walking in front of the great talisman master. Did he think that she couldn't sense the faint trace of talisman energy on his body? "You're that rank 1 spirit master Li Qian." Mata recognized him. When his cultivation exploded earlier, everyone's attention was focused on the few high-level mystic cultivators and spiritualists, so it was very easy to recognize him. When Li Qian realized that he couldn't break free from the defensive thunder barrier, his eyes revealed a trace of fear. "What do we do now?" Che Rumen nervously looked at the wretched man. The latter rolled his dead fish eyes and snorted contemptuously. "You're really too stupid. You've already been caught. But you still don't know how to throw out the talisman. But how did that woman discover Li Qian? Didn't you say?" Che Rumen grabbed the wretched man and kept asking, but he gave her an impatient glance. "What's the point of saying this now?" The wretched man snorted. A level 1 spiritualist who used an invisibility amulet was actually discovered by a level 15 mystic cultivator. This is truly the biggest joke in the world. The wretched man still wanted to ridicule her, but Li Qian, who was trapped inside the defensive lightning cover, finally thought of taking out the puppet talisman that was floating with blue light from his sleeve. The wretched man sneered. Chapter 1673. Idiot. The vulgar man sneered. "You should have taken it out earlier. Talismans wouldn't be blocked by spirit weapons. At such a close distance, the talisman would definitely be able to pass through the spirit weapon's cover and directly enter the little girl's consciousness." At that time the vulgar man's eyes were filled with a determined flame. However, in the next second, this person's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. He stood stiffly beside Che Rumen, as if he had been petrified. He slowly raised his hand. Suddenly, he clutched his chest. A mouthful of blood violently spurted out from his mouth. The vulgar man was greatly alarmed. He secretly cursed. What was this situation? Backlash. Not only was the puppet talisman that he created ineffective against the little girl, it even backfired on him. How was this possible? At the same time that the vulgar man was shocked, his entire body was on the verge of collapse, and he almost fell on his butt. Arbor's ice bead-like eyes were already looking towards his hiding place. The talisman that this guy threw over emitted a special dark aura. Arbor instantly realized that the talisman in Li Qian's hand was puppet talisman. At this time, the vulgar man Tan Fa was also extremely shocked. According to the level of a talisman master, this vulgar man's talent was actually quite high. At least among the disciples of the same sect, his talisman talent was very outstanding. Compared to the martial uncles of the same sect, who had been by the Grandmaster's side since they were young, and could only reach the level of a high-level talisman master after studying for so long, the vulgar man Tan Fa's talent was obviously higher. Talisman masters were different from talisman masters. Compared to the systematic inheritance of talisman masters, the forbidden technique of talisman masters had actually been more or less submerged in the torrent of history. At least, it was impossible to have a systematic and traditional learning method like talisman masters. Talismans were passed down by word of mouth and had to be learned in secret. Because once people discovered that you were a talisman master, you would face the danger of being burned to death. The vulgar man Tan Fa, through this arduous process of learning talismans, finally stepped into the realm of a great yellow-level talisman master with great difficulty. He even believed that compared to talisman masters of the same level, His ability would definitely surpass Talisman Masters by a large margin. However, Tan Fa did not understand why he would suffer a backlash from the puppet charm. Currently, his conscience was in extreme pain, and his reason was telling him that he had to leave the scene immediately. Otherwise, he might suffer an even more severe blow. That was why he held his head. And under Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang's line of sight, he pressed down on Che Rumen's left shoulder. Suddenly, he raised his left hand, and a teleportation glyph array formed by 24 jade slips appeared under his feet. Rumen! Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang cried out in shock. In the blink of an eye, the wretched man, Tan Fa, grabbed Che Rumen and disappeared into the transfer glyph array. The last thing they saw was Che Rumen's deathly pale face. At that moment, Che Rumen found that he could not resist at all. When this seemingly level 13 great mystic cultivator pressed down on her left shoulder, she felt a chill run down her spine. In that instant, Che Rumen felt as though all the strength in her body had been sucked out, and she couldn't even use the slightest bit of profound energy. Che Rumen looked at her companion in horror, and then disappeared from the teleportation array glyphs. The teleportation glyph array appeared suddenly, and disappeared just as quickly, when Xiaomu shot over like an arrow. Chapter 1674. That wretched man who had secretly attacked her, and wanted to use a puppet charm, had already pulled the carriage, and disappeared without a trace. Another transportation talisman array. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. The talisman patrician family had never given her the slightest bit of support or warmth, and had always been a hindrance to her. Several times, the people she wanted to deal with had escaped through the transportation talisman array. This caused Arbor's impression of the entire Mu family to worsen. She also had an increasingly bad impression of those so-called relatives of the Mu family that she had never met. Did that wretched man think that he could slip away with the transportation talisman array? A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes. Ordinary people naturally couldn't sense talisman energy, but for a great talisman master, it was really too simple to feel the flow of talisman energy. The black silk moved without wind, and Arbor's face was covered in frost. Zhu Bozong only saw that the girl standing in front of him had a talisman glowing with blue light suddenly ignited on the fingertip of her left hand. This was a tracking talisman that could lock onto a target based on talisman energy. As long as this wretched man didn't escape from Shuntiang continent, then the tracking talisman would be able to record his position and transmit it to her within 3 days. Arbor coldly swept a glance over Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang. The latter trembled slightly and took a step back together. Zhu Bozong boldly raised his head under the pressure of her gaze. He carefully looked at the little girl and said, "Miss, this time our team leader was in the wrong, but you didn't suffer any harm. Can you release our teammate Li Qian?" Li Qian was still trapped inside the defensive thunder barrier. According to Arbor's style of doing things, how could she let go of someone who had deliberately tried to harm her? Just because they didn't succeed in harming her didn't mean that they were innocent. A cold glint flashed through Arbor's eyes, and she looked at the two with incomparable coldness. If you don't want to die, then scram immediately. Every injustice had its perpetrator, and every debt its debtor. These two people didn't do anything to her, so she was clear about right and wrong. Naturally, she wouldn't retaliate against them. Of course, if these two people still didn't have eyes and wanted to continue making trouble for her, then she naturally wouldn't be polite and let them go. Zhu Bozong's expression changed slightly. "Miss Chiao, please show mercy. We were just tricked by that wretched man. That's why Captain Che was so stubborn and wanted to use this method to deal with you." "What's that person's name?" Arbor asked coldly. "I only know that her name is Tan Fa. "Yes, we only know that his name is Tan Fa. We really don't know anything else about him." "You've been together for a day and a night as teammates. You don't know anything?" "Miss Chiao, every word we said is true. Please verify it," Zhu Bokong said seriously. "Humph," Arbor snorted. "A person of unknown origin actually dares to be randomly assigned to his own team. I'm starting to sympathize with your captain. Why do you think Tan Fa wanted to drag her along?" Hearing this, Zhu Bozong stiffened and stared blankly at the little girl in front of him. Before this, Tan Fa had acted very wretched in front of them, and he had repeatedly emphasized that he wanted to capture this little girl in front of him. But in the end, the two of them didn't know how Tan Fa got injured, and actually dragged their captain away. This really made them very confused. Chapter 1675. The little girl's words now made their hearts in a mess. Wei Che Rumen and Li Qian could be considered as long-term teammates. To tell the truth, in Shentiang continent, where people are unfamiliar, having more friends means more paths, right? Now that they are a small team of 4, they still have some confidence in doing missions. If there are only 2 of them left, what are they going to do? You only have yourself to blame. Arbor coldly glances at the 2 of them, then says, "You can scram now." Zhu Bozong still wants to persuade her, but his companion tugs at his sleeve. "Little girl, where it is possible to make mistakes, one should spare them." Peng Guang says, "Although Li Qian has offended you, but seeing that you are not injured at all, can you be magnanimous and let him go? To people who want to kill me, I will never give them a chance to live." Arbor indifferently throws down these words, and Li Qian's panicked and fearful cries immediately come from inside the defensive thunder barrier. Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang turn around to look. They see Li Qian being cut into pieces by streaks of crisscrossing lightning. He really doesn't have the least bit of room to resist. A level 1 spirit master, in a matter of minutes, completely died in front of them. Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang look at Arbor with a huge change in expression, and a chill rises in their hearts. They only feel that the girl in front of them is very frightening. "You wanted to use the puppet charm to control me, but didn't succeed. Doesn't mean you didn't do it. If I was just a weak girl, this time, you have already succeeded. Don't look at me with such innocent eyes. You two are very clear in your hearts. You are not innocent at all, right?" After saying that, she expressionlessly sweeps a glance at them, then turns around and leaves. Her fingertips turn slightly, and the defensive thunder barrier is taken back by her. Turning back to meet Mata's eyes, she sees that he doesn't show any displeasure or disapproval, but calmly looks at her and smiles slightly. Mata suddenly raises his hand, holding up the roasted spirit beast meat, and chuckles. "Jojo, I found a bit of salt in little Fatty's pocket with great difficulty. I smeared some on this spirit beast meat. Now it finally has a little taste. Don't you plan to have a taste? I've been roasting it for a long time." Arbor smiled faintly. For some reason, his gloomy mood became somewhat cheerful. Qi Xianxian spent more than half a day meditating to advance her cultivation. It wasn't until evening that she opened her eyes and said to her 4 teammates with a smile, "I skipped the entry stage of level 14 Mystic Cultivator and directly entered the gradual attainment stage. What do you think?" The little fatty was extremely envious. He stared at Qi Xianxian and said, "Hey, you're awesome. In the Lava Mountain range, how the hell did he manage to pass the entrance test? Do you really have to be so lucky?" Qi Xianxian chuckled and said, "I don't believe that your cultivation base didn't improve at all after drinking the spirit tea. From the looks of it, you're only a small step away from breaking through to the spirit realm. No, maybe it's only half a step." Hearing that, the little fatty rubbed his nose and chuckled. "Ha, I really can't hide anything from your eyes. That is indeed the case. I see that it's getting late today." Arbor said softly, "Xianxian has advanced for a day, so she should have a good rest now. Let's stay here for now and relax." Chapter 1676. When the sun rises tomorrow, we will enter the second-class area and scatter some medicinal powder at the entrance of the second-class area to attract the spirit beasts. By then, we should be able to complete the mission by tomorrow morning. Okay. No one had any objections and nodded. Little Fatty said excitedly, "Aya, we can finally leave this damn lava mountain range." Qi Xianxian looked at him with a faint smile. "Is that so? You must know that after passing this test, it will be the day when we can truly live in the lava mountain range." Little Fatty's face stiffened and he cried bitterly, "Sigh, from now on, we will be living in this furnace every day. It's so hot." Everyone burst out laughing. That night, the entire lava mountain range finally quieted down. Fairy Huanghe's group was rather unlucky. They did not walk out of the lava mountain range. Instead, They looked worriedly at the red fog in the sky, and looked at each other worriedly. His teammates, who were sitting in a circle, also looked pale. Their heads drooped, and they seemed to be weak. "Fairy, what should we do now? There's fog in the lava mountain range. It has blocked the way. If this continues, we will soon run out of food and water." Everyone had spent a long time in the lava mountain range. The water and food in their inner worlds were almost depleted. After that, they gave 6 bottles of water to Che Rumen and the rest. Fairy Huang he could not help but feel a little regretful now. If she had known, they would not be able to leave the lava mountain range today. She would not have let her teammates give the water to Che Rumen and the rest. Now they themselves had fallen into a predicament. But why would there be fog all of a sudden? Fairy Huang he could not figure it out. "I think that if this continues, all of us will collapse due to dehydration. We have to conserve our energy now. It's best if we meet up with the previous teams and see if there is a better way to get out together." Fairy Huang he nodded slightly. The next day, early in the morning, Qi Xianxian and the rest saw Arbor brewing tea the moment they opened their eyes. Their eyes lit up at the same time. Arbor really did brew a pot of tea, and judging from the refreshing aroma, it was obvious that it was the spirit tea they drank before. Everyone tacitly agreed that Xiao Mu's spiritual tea and teapot must have been stored inside her storage talisman. They all felt that the spirit tea was very useful, and were eagerly eyeing the spirit tea. Unexpectedly, Arbor also cooked vegetable soup and rice for them in the other 2 pots. When Arbor saw that they were awake, he looked back at them and said, "I made the soup casually. It might not taste good. However, she put a spirit bamboo shoot in it, which could be considered as making up for her poor culinary skills." Qi Xianxian hugged her and said emotionally, "Jojo, you've made us tea, soup, and rice so early in the morning. Yes, it's great that you're here." Arbor didn't think she was that good. Anyway, she woke up early and had nothing to do, so she made them a pot of tea. Moreover, according to the progress of the mission, they should be able to complete the mission of killing the remaining 3 spirit beasts today. Then, they could summon Instructor Wei Wei and bring them back to the academy. Who knew what the future would be like? When the team returned to the academy, they would naturally disband. Since it was fate that brought them together, they should cherish this fate. Chapter 1677. The lava mountain range was simply too hot. She also felt extremely uncomfortable staying here. One had to know that the sacred water was still circulating in her body. The sacred water could suppress the heat in the first place, so her situation should be the best among the 5 of them. Arbor tilted his head to look at them and said to the 4 of them, "Do you guys want to drink the spirit tea first or the soup first?" "Of course it's the spirit tea." Was there a need to ask? The 4 of them simultaneously glanced at the pot of tea. Arbor picked up the teapot and filled the small cups in front of everyone. The 5 of them drank together. After drinking 3 cups of tea in succession, Arbor called everyone over to drink the soup. Other than the vegetable soup, there was also rice. It was early in the morning, and they were just in time to go up the mountain to hunt spirit beasts after eating rice with vegetables and soup. Everyone only felt that this meal was hilarious. After a full meal, they felt that their bodies were emitting an endless amount of energy. This could be said to be the vigor of dragons and ferocity of tigers. Everyone felt that their bodies were brimming with mystic energy. After eating this rice breakfast, Arbor led them to the 2nd category area. He found a place with a wider view and sprinkled medicinal powder. There were indeed many more spirit beasts in the 2nd category area than in the 1st category area. Not long after, more than 10 blind spirit beasts ran over. Arbor's group only needed to complete the mission of 3 spirit beasts. Even if they killed more spirit beasts, there wouldn't be any rewards. Thus, the 5 of them looked at each other in unison and stealthily hid to the side. They lured the 3 spirit beasts into the 1st category area and quickly took care of them. Just as Arbor was about to disperse the remaining spirit beasts, a beast roar came from the 2nd category area. This beast roar was different from those low-level spirit beasts from before. That roar was simply earth-shattering and earth-shattering, causing everyone's hearts to tremble. The entire lava mountain range was covered by this beast roar. Instructor Wei Wei, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and secretly cursed. He had already rushed in the direction of the beast roar. Arbor's group of 5 was ready for battle. They all looked at a pair of bell-sized eyes that peeked out from the stone forest. Its snow-white fur came into view. In less than a second, a snow leopard suddenly rushed out from the stone forest. Qi Xianxian and the other 3 felt their hearts tighten. Their fingers turned slightly pale as they raised their weapons and aimed them at the snow leopard. Arbor looked at the snow leopard. How should he put it? It felt like déjà vu. Déjà vu. Why did it feel like déjà vu? At this moment, Instructor Wei Wei's roar came from behind. Disperse. Then, a surge of spiritual energy rushed towards the snow leopard. Everyone saw the spiritual energy in Instructor Wei Wei's hand turn into a spiritual bird. He suddenly charged towards the snow leopard. However, the snow leopard didn't even raise its head. Instead, it stretched out its paw and slapped the spirit bird drawn by Instructor Wei Wei to death. Instructor Wei Wei spat out a mouthful of blood and immediately took a few steps back. He turned his head to look at the 5 dumbfounded people and roared. What are you all still standing there for? Hurry up and run. The 5 Arbor players felt Teacher Wei Wei was also a little funny. Didn't he say that he wouldn't care if they lived or died? Could it be that he was also a stubborn instructor? Instructor Wei Wei's sudden gentleness towards them and his cold face suddenly changed into an anxious look, which made everyone feel very strange. The 6th watch ended. Chapter 1678. Hurry and leave. I'll hold this place off first. Instructor Wei Wei struggled to prop himself up and stood in front of everyone as he berated anxiously. Just as he was about to attack the snow leopard again, Little Fatty's loud roar suddenly came from behind. Everyone turned to look and saw Little Fatty abruptly dart out from Instructor Wei Wei's side. His chubby body was like a ball as he fiercely smashed towards the snow leopard. Arbor and the other 3 could not help but cover their eyes. Little Fatty rapidly rolled in front of the snow leopard like a wheel, but the latter did not even look at him. It raised its front paw and directly smacked Little Fatty's head hard. Little Fatty was instantly sent flying. That snow leopard understood human nature very well. When it saw Little Fatty fly out, it actually raised its leg and kicked Little Fatty's chubby butt again. Therefore, Little Fatty undoubtedly used a speed faster than when he came and rolled back like he was flying. Furthermore, it was accompanied by a soul-stirring howl. Everyone was instantly extremely embarrassed as they silently glanced at the funny Little Fatty. Their gazes met, and they looked at each other in bewilderment. Little Fatty rolled all the way until he was very far away, before he steadied himself. His chubby round face instantly flushed red as he struggled to move his arms and legs, looking like he wanted to immediately roll back. Arbor could not help but reach out and remind him. Stand up. Only then did the Little Fatty suddenly jump up, rolling and crawling as he jumped up from the ground. The snow leopard indifferently glanced at Little Fatty. That little gaze was simply filled with endless contempt. Even though Little Fatty was not the person involved, Qi Xianxian still felt her balls hurt when she saw it. Little Fatty even flew into a rage out of humiliation as he glared at the snow leopard. This fellow's entire body was full of round meat. Other than being a little dusty, he did not suffer any injuries. The proud snow leopard did not seem to really want to kill him either. Perhaps it was because it looked down on Little Fatty's cultivation very much. It completely treated Little Fatty as a fly that flew over and just swatted him away. Little Fatty also understood the snow leopard's gaze and was immediately infuriated by its contemptuous gaze. A scholar prefers death to humiliation. He was a dignified peak level 15 mystic cultivator. So why did it seem like he couldn't deal with this leopard? Seeing the Little Fatty charging forward again without fear of death, Instructor Wei Wei's gaze suddenly changed. Was there a hole in this guy's head? Even the spiritual technique that he, a level 12 great spiritual master, had just thrown out had been instantly swatted back by the snow leopard. Alright? Just based on this little fellow's flowery but impractical moves, what could he do to this divine beast in front of him? Stop joking around. Little Fatty summoned a double-headed hammer from his conscience and charged towards the snow leopard while carrying his broken hammer. It was as if he was going to fight the divine beast to the death. Instructor Wei Wei suddenly took a step forward, and the figure that was flying towards little Fatty was a flying kick. He immediately stomped on the ground and kicked the little Fatty out of the sky. Arbor, Qi Xianxian, Duamuqing and Mata were speechless. Little Fatty was caught off guard and was kicked in the butt by Instructor Wei Wei, causing him to fly even further away than before. He directly drew a gorgeous parabola in the sky. Thump! He fell headfirst onto the ground, almost falling like a dog chewing on mud. Speaking of which, little Fatty's vitality was very tenacious. Chapter 1679. Although his buttocks were in extreme pain, he still jumped up immediately. With a baffled expression, the little Fatty looked at Instructor Wei Wei with a strange expression and exclaimed in a high-pitched voice, "Tut, instructor! What are you doing? Ah! Who would treat their students like this? Ah! Was this a personal tutor? Which school's tutor would do such a thing?" He was just about to fight with the snow leopard. This tutor actually stepped in and kicked his buttocks. It was even more painful than the snow leopard's sudden kick. He was in so much pain that he grimaced. He looked at Instructor Wei Wei with a dumbfounded expression, not knowing what to say. Instructor Wei Wei glanced at him coldly. The next second he roared, "Get lost!" The five of them looked at each other silently. Qi Xianxian hurriedly pulled Arbor and was about to turn around. Who knew that the snow leopard suddenly roared at them? The roar was so loud that everyone immediately turned around and looked at it warily. The snow leopard looked like it was about to pounce on them and attack. If they were to leave now, they would leave their backs open to the snow leopard. It was probably too late. Instructor Wei Wei's face was solemn. He hurriedly took out a communication jade talisman from his sleeve and wrote a few strokes. Then his expression changed slightly as he looked at the 5 students and said coldly, "When I say run later, run immediately. Don't look back." Arbor looked at him indifferently and did not say anything. Wei Wei turned his head and saw the snow leopard taking graceful steps and lightly jumping in front of him. It raised its paws and actually walked towards the direction of the 5 students. Wei Wei's expression changed. He reached out to stop it, but the snow leopard turned around and roared at him unhappily. Subsequently, without even looking at him, she tossed him aside and quickly skipped over to Qiao Mu's side. Qi Xianxian panicked when she saw this. His figure flashed, and he abruptly blocked in front of Qiao Mu, blocking her with his hand. A treasure sword with purple light swirling around it was summoned from her conscious. The sword was filled with spirit energy. Qi Xianxian looked at the snow leopard coldly and said, "Stop right there. With him around, this damned leopard would never be able to hurt her Jojo." Roar! The snow leopard growled at Qi Xianxian in dissatisfaction. It tilted its head, and its eyes were obviously telling her to get lost. Arbor's eyes lit up as he stared at the snow leopard that was behaving strangely. He gently tugged on Qi Xuanxuan's sleeve. "Don't worry," she said in a low voice. With a flash of her body, she slipped past Qi Xianxian and quickly ran towards the snow leopard. "Don't go over." Duamuqing hurriedly stopped him. Instructor Wei Wei was also staring at her with a very disapproving gaze. "What are you doing here?" Arbor did not care about them. At this moment, he was only a few steps away from the snow leopard. A pair of bright and round eyes looked at it, and the corners of her mouth twitched, revealing a rare smile. "Little Snow." The snow leopard rolled on the ground, raised its head, and suddenly lay down on the ground. That appearance was simply comparable to a domestic kitten. The few of them stared at it in shock. This was the same one that killed the instructor's spirit bird with one slap. Was it a super divine beast? Where did this cat come from? Hurry up and take it away. Chapter 1680. Don't you think it's too much for a mighty divine beast to suddenly show such a docile expression on your furry face? Since you're so docile, why did you roar and yell just now? You even made it look like the earth was shaking and the mountains were shaking. Who the hell are you trying to show off to? Everyone watched as Miss Qiao ran forward with a cheer. Under everyone's watchful eyes, she actually jumped onto the snow leopard's broad back and even rolled around on top of it. She even touched the snow leopard's ears while she was at it. Oh my God, That big guy actually didn't look angry at all. It just laid there motionless. Qi Xianxian and little Fatty's eyes widened at the same time. They looked at the snow leopard in disbelief, then looked at Arbor, who was rolling on its back. Jojo? Qi Xianxian couldn't help but cry out. This snow leopard, you? Relative. Uffed. Little Fatty almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Whose relative was a leopard? This Qi Xianxian was already incoherent. Duanmuqing also took a few steps forward. Seeing that Arbor was fine, he sighed in relief and said, Have you seen it before? Arbor tilted its head and thought for a while. Then it sat up and looked at them. Little Snow used to be my husband's summoned beast. Summoned beast? You're married? Clearly, Duanmuqing, Mata, and little Fatty's focus was different. Arbor cast a glance at him and nodded. Only then did Mata realize what was going on. He covered his chest with one hand and said in a disappointed tone, Oh my God! Why is it that all the good girls in this world are already other people's wives? Little Fatty also blinked his eyes. Chow, you got married really early. Early? Xiaomu didn't have any idea. At that time, it was the crown prince who told her that they had been together for 7 to 8 years, and that it was time to give them a title. Yes, I'll definitely get married after I get married. I've known my husband for 7 to 8 years, Miss Chow said expressionlessly. After 7 to 8 years of being together, they were already an old couple. It was indeed time to give the crown prince a title. Otherwise, it would be too unfair for him, Miss Chow thought. Everyone was speechless. Why did they feel that this silly girl in front of them seemed to have been tricked by her husband? Cough. Qi Xianxian hurriedly pulled everyone's attention back. Shouldn't the main point be the summoning talisman? Oh right. Fatty's face lit up with joy. Jojo, you can draw summoning talismans. Arbor nodded. So this teammate might have more than one beast by his side. Qi Xianxian and the other three shifted their gazes to Instructor Wei Wei's face. Wei Wei's expression was indeed somewhat stiff. He did not expect that the snow leopard in front of him was actually Miss Chow's old friend. How could he endure this? Why didn't the two of them acknowledge each other earlier? That snow leopard even looked like it was about to attack. Wait. It seemed like this snow leopard had only waved its claws twice. It was their own conjecture that the snow leopard wanted to attack them. Actually, when the snow leopard first swung its claws at him, it used too much force and caused him to spit out blood. After that, it very politely controlled its strength. Even when it slapped little Fatty twice, it did not hurt him. Instructor Wei Wei was somewhat speechless. Training in the Lava Mountain Range, a student could even meet her husband's summoned beast. That with such a complicated relationship, Instructor Wei Wei expressed that it was a small world. Chapter 1681. Cough. Mata suddenly smiled and said, It's great to see you here, Instructor. We've completed the mission of eliminating 10 second-grade spirit beasts. Can you bring us away now? Instructor Wei Wei's expression changed slightly as he looked at Mata. Oh, what about the crystal core? Arbor glanced at him indifferently. Wait here. She then called Duanmuqing, Mata, and little Fatty, and went behind the rocks at the back before releasing the 10 spirit beast corpses. The 4 of them moved the 10 spirit beast corpses in front of the instructor. Wei Wei's expression was complicated as he looked at the students, then at the spirit beast in the middle that had obviously been slaughtered. Instructor Wei Wei frowned slightly as he stared at Arbor with a serious expression. You're a talisman master. You should have a storage talisman, right? Qi Xianxian and the others' hearts skipped a beat. They were too complacent just now and actually exposed Jojo's identity as a talisman master in front of Instructor Wei Wei. Arbor nodded indifferently. This matter could not be hidden from the academy at all, and she did not feel that there was anything to hide. Being a talisman master was not a shameful skill. So what if she could draw talismans? That was also a result of her talent. Since that's the case, why didn't you say so from the start? Instructor Wei Wei asked coldly. I sealed your conscience, but I didn't expect you to take a shortcut. With something like a storage talisman, does it make a difference whether I seal your conscience or not? You didn't ask. Wei Wei was stunned and took a while to recall that the little fellow was answering his first question. Why didn't you say so from the start? He could not help but laugh in anger. Wasn't it him who said that this student gave him an extremely bad impression when they first met? She had the appearance of a young miss from an aristocratic family. Everyone else had to work hard to reach the peak of a top academy. But what about her? She came riding a phoenix. Could she be more daring? Of course, aristocratic families also had the capital of aristocratic families. For example, this child in front of him had the aura of a nouveau riche from head to toe. She casually made an ancient sacred beast, the Bloodfire Phoenix, appear. Now he realized that as a talisman master, her skill in drawing talismans was very impressive. Such children had a much higher starting point than others, so it was inevitable that they would be arrogant and unsociable. He wasn't deliberately targeting her, but he wanted to suppress her spirit and grind her edges and corners. An academy like theirs might not be able to keep such an arrogant child. Instructor Wei Wei sneered in his heart. His expression was very rigid as he said in a matter-of-fact tone. Since that's the case, your results are full of exaggeration. How is it fake? Just a moment ago, they thought that this teacher who stood up to protect them wasn't that annoying anymore. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye, he was still so annoying? Qi Xianxian couldn't help but say angrily. These 10 spirit beasts were painstakingly killed by us. You sealed our inner worlds. We've only been eating some dry rations for the past 2 days. How can there be water? Even though I'm not a symbol master, I know that a symbol master's storage talisman can store many items. Instructor Wei Wei looked at them coldly and said, compared to the others, your team obviously has an advantage in terms of living. Qi Xianxian frowned. When she thought about the spirit tea, she couldn't help but feel a little guilty. But at this time, how could they shrink back? They couldn't just nod and agree, and Instructor Wei Wei would nullify their mission results. You have no basis. Arbor glanced coldly at Instructor Wei Wei. Chapter 1682. Wei Wei's face darkened. What do you want to say? I'm talking about your baseless conjecture. Arbor glanced at him mockingly. Did you personally see me take out extra water and food from my storage talisman as supplies? Wasn't this nonsense? He didn't follow their team all day, so he naturally couldn't have seen it with his own eyes. Seeing Instructor Wei Wei's constipated expression, Arbor said coldly, since you didn't see it, don't talk nonsense. Who told you that a storage talisman must contain a pile of food and water? As soon as he finished speaking, he flipped his hand, and a storage talisman floated between his fingers. Suddenly, the storage space opened. A pile of items splashed onto the empty space in front of the instructor like it was raining. Instantly, it wasn't just Instructor Wei Wei who looked constipated. Her teammates were also looking at her strangely. This small mountain of gold beads and gold bars in front of them. Haha! Could someone explain to them what was going on? I like gold, the little stoic said coldly. I just like gold. Let me tell you, even if my inner world isn't sealed, there's nothing to eat inside. My inner world is filled with gold, silver, and jewelry. Everyone stared at her dumbstruck for a long time. Instructor Wei Wei's mouth inexplicably twitched inwardly, and he was freaking speechless for a moment. Why did he suddenly not want to talk to this student? And why did he feel like his chest and lungs were hurting from anger? Fairy, there's someone ahead. Abruptly, a somewhat hoarse voice entered Wei Wei and the others' ears. Wei Wei and the others all turned their heads to look. They saw Fairy Huang He leading a dozen or so battered soldiers, and approaching them with a sickly expression. Fairy Huang He and the others were slightly pale, and their lips were chapped, looking like they were dehydrated. Following behind Fairy Huang, He were several teams from other academies participating in the trial. Zhu Bozong and Peng Guang were also following behind Fairy Huang He and the others. When they saw the little stoic from afar, their expressions changed slightly, and they subconsciously blended into the crowd. Under Fairy Huang He's lead, the group of old, weak, sick, and disabled people walked to Instructor Wei Wei's side. When the students saw the amiable instructor, they almost burst into tears. Instructor Wei Wei. Teacher, what if we can't get out? Roar. The snow leopard growled in dissatisfaction. What was going on when a bunch of idiots walked over and started crying? He had disturbed its good time with the little girl. That low roar caused everyone's gazes to converge. When they saw the true appearance of the snow leopard, everyone suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air and instantly took a step back in shock. Although the snow leopard was just lying there without moving, the divine beast aura that was faintly emitted from its body made everyone feel extremely uneasy. One of the students who was participating in the entrance test could not help but gulp. His eyes revealed a trace of fear. "Teacher, how did you provoke such a huge beast? Forgive them for being unable to help even if they wanted to. At a time like this, how could they still rush forward?" The student shuffled backward, looking like he was about to run away. Xiaomu glanced up at him, before stroking the snow leopard's perked ears. The snow leopard shook its snow-white fur slightly. Because its fur had been smoothed, it was instantly in a good mood. It obediently lay down and stopped making noise. The student's eyes widened in shock. "Go to sleep and catch up tomorrow." Chapter 1683. That student's expression changed abruptly. He pointed at Arbor and instantly shrieked. "You cheated! You can actually summon mystic beasts to help?" Looking at the 10 spirit beast corpses neatly arranged on the ground, jealousy flashed through the eyes of the other team's students. They didn't expect that there would really be a team that could accomplish this and complete the seemingly impossible mission within 3 days. On what basis? They clearly agreed that everyone's spiritual senses were sealed, and they entered Lava Mountain Range to train. On what basis could this team have mystic beasts following them? Having a profound beast by his side to assist him in hunting was a completely different battle experience compared to fighting alone. Many students looked at Xiao Mu in dissatisfaction and whispered to each other in low voices. There were even some who loudly voiced their doubts, like the student whose expression had changed abruptly. They even turned to look at Instructor Wei Wei and requested that the instructor exempt Arbor's team from this time's results. "Shut up, Fairy Huang," he suddenly reprimanded them harshly, her eyes brimming with disapproval as she looked at those students. "How could you all criticize your benefactor in such a manner? Previously, it was this little lady who had noble character and unquestionable integrity, and disregarded her own life to lure away a powerful spirit beast, allowing us to escape from danger." "Fairy Huang," he said angrily, "how can you repay kindness with enmity and yell at your benefactor like this?" Benefactor? Not only were Qi Xianxian and the others stupefied, even Instructor Wei Wei's eyes were filled with incredulity. According to their understanding of the little girl, it was impossible for the little girl to do such a thing for nothing. They didn't know if this fairy had misunderstood something. If it weren't for this little lady's help, how could we have survived until now? "Fairy Huang," he reprimanded loudly. "Didn't you guys say earlier that you should properly thank that young lady when you see her later? Could it be that this is your so-called gratitude? Shameless." Fairy Huang He's reprimand caused everyone's faces to darken, especially the first student who questioned Arbor. He hung his head and was so ashamed that he couldn't raise it. The little stoic was expressionless, her heart completely unperturbed. In reality, she simply didn't know what the others were arguing about. Qi Xianxian, little fatty, and the others cursed in their hearts. This fairy couldn't be talking about how the little stoic lured the mystic beast horde over, picked out the spirit beasts, and killed them before driving the mystic beast horde away, right? It was clearly the little stoic who thought of a once-and-for-all lazy method to kill spirit beasts to complete the mission. Why did the fairy say that he had a noble character that no one could compare to? Qi Xianxian and the other 3 turned to look at the stoic face. Seeing that the latter was expressionless and gave off an unfathomable feeling, the corners of their mouths instantly twitched. Fairy Yellow Crane stepped forward and bowed to Arbor, passionately expressing her gratitude. The little stoic glanced at her silently and didn't say anything, because she didn't know what to say. In the fairy maiden's eyes, the little stoic immediately became a good person who didn't talk much and only liked to do practical things. "Miss, I'm Yellow Crane. I'm willing to befriend you," said Fairy Yellow Crane hurriedly. "By the way, did anyone notice? There's a red mist in the Lava Mountain Range, and it's blocking the way. Make up for yesterday." Chapter 1684. Wei Wei looked up at the red mist above the Lava Mountain Range and nodded indifferently. This is because lava is everywhere in the depths of the lava mountain range. This red mist will appear at the beginning of every month. But it doesn't matter. In this situation, you only need to wait for a night. When the mist dissipates tomorrow morning, you can leave. After saying this, Teacher Weiwei specially glanced at the few groups behind Fairy Huanghe. Everyone's situation was very bad. Especially Fairy Yellow Crane's team. They had agreed to leave this damned place, the lava mountain range, by today. They had always believed that they could enter Anka City and have a good rest before nightfall. In the end, once the hope in the bottom of his heart was overturned, his entire spirit and energy also collapsed. Coupled with the anxiety and uncertainty about the future, the members of Fairy Yellow Crane's team were in a very bad situation. As the leader, Fairy Yellow Crane naturally knew that her team members were in a bad situation. But now, she was like a clay bodhisattva crossing a river. She couldn't even protect herself, so how could she care about others? Since the afternoon, Fairy Yellow Crane's water supply had been cut off. Cutting off water in the scorching lava mountain range meant that they were one step closer to death. Cultivators only had slightly better endurance than others. Even great spiritualists might not be able to achieve true inedia. Weiwei asked in a low voice, "What do your team say? Do you want to leave with them, or continue with the unfinished entrance test mission? If we persevere until the end, can you guarantee that we'll definitely be able to enter the academy?" A student licked his dry lips and suddenly asked. Weiwei glanced at him indifferently and shook his head. "I can't guarantee it. In reality, the top academies would not recruit more than 3 students every year. The academy had always been working towards cultivating elite students. The good and the bad were uneven. Even if there were many students, it would not be of much use. The students who would stay in the top academies in the end would definitely be the 3 most outstanding students in this batch. There was no need to doubt this. When the student heard him say such heartless words, his face immediately turned green with anger. Since there was no guarantee that he would be able to enter the academy, who would be happy to continue tormenting himself? If he continued tormenting himself like this, his life would be over. He would not be able to enter the academy before he died. Who could accept this? What kind of top-notch academy was this? It wasn't even as famous as the 4 great academies. No one would be willing to sacrifice their time and life for such an unknown academy. In the end, they might even end up with nothing. Although it had only been 2 nights in the lava mountain range, it felt like 2 to 3 years had passed. It was torturous. Behind Fairy Yellow Crane, several student groups were clamoring that they wanted to immediately leave the mountain and never have any interaction with the top academies again. When Instructor Weiwei heard this, he simply nodded his head indifferently. He didn't even try to persuade him to stay. If he wanted to stay, he would stay. If he wanted to leave, he would leave. This was his attitude. This made those students who had spent so much effort to no avail feel somewhat dejected. The crowd that was already irritated by the lack of water suddenly became restless. Chapter 1685. However, due to Fairy Yellow Crane's benefactor excuse, the group was a bit embarrassed and directly asked Arbor and the others if they had water. Arbor was currently tidying up the pile of treasures at Instructor Weiwei's feet with his head lowered. After being interrupted by Fairy Yellow Crane and the others, Instructor Weiwei forgot to ruthlessly teach this student a lesson. How can you use your inner world? A youth participating in the entrance test couldn't help but question when he saw Arbor unhurriedly tidying up the pile of treasures on the ground with bulging eyes. Although Fairy Yellow Crane felt her mouth and tongue dry, she still couldn't resist jumping out to stop that youth. "Why are you making a fuss? Did you not understand what I said just now? Daring to raise your voice at my benefactor means you're going against me." That youth couldn't help but grit his teeth and whisper, "Fairy, could you have seen wrongly? We're all well aware of Arbor's strength. He's only a level 15 minor success great mystic cultivator. You're saying he entered a mystic beast horde alone, and even lured away the spirit beasts? No one would believe you if you said that. Punk, are you courting death?" Seeing that Fairy Yellow Crane was about to attack him, that youth hastily shrunk his neck and retreated a step. He stammered awkwardly, "I am only judging the matter as it stands. After all, Your words are very different from Miss Chiao's own strength. If Miss Chiao was a level 15 great spiritual cultivator, then it was still acceptable for her to enter a mystic beast horde alone and safely lure away the spirit beasts. But right now, this little lady surnamed Chiao is only a level 15 great mystic cultivator. In terms of cultivation, which one of the people present wasn't a level 13 great mystic cultivator or above? Could there be such a big difference between two levels? Oh, a dozen or so level 13 great mystic cultivators couldn't beat a mystic beast horde. But a little lady could easily enter and exit a mystic beast horde and lure away the spirit beasts? That was impossible. Fairy Yellow Crane most likely saw wrongly due to her old age. Fairy Yellow Crane was just about to swing her fist and punch that punk in the face. On the other side, the little stoic had calmly finished packing up her things. She didn't even look up and directly walked to the snow leopard's side. She jumped onto its back and rubbed its snow-white fur. Let's go. Roar. The snow leopard turned around and faced the students with different expressions with its butt. With Arbor on its back, it walked gracefully. Qi Xian and the rest did not hesitate and hurriedly followed behind. They did not even look at the group of students. A bunch of idiots couldn't be bothered with them. In fact, Jojo was the one who had caused the mystical beast horde. But if Jojo hadn't chased the mystical beasts away, would these idiots still be alive? He even dared to question Jojo's actual combat ability. He's really something. If Jojo really wanted to argue with them, even if they ganged up on Jojo, they would not be able to gain any advantage. If Jojo claimed to be number 2 in terms of actual combat, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. Hey, wait. When the group of students saw Arbor and the others leave without looking back, they immediately became anxious. The youth who spoke even chased after them and asked with an unsightly expression, "Wait! I saw many water sacks hanging from the little fatty's waist earlier. Since we're acquaintances, why don't you give a few water sacks to?" Scram! Arbor turned around and used a mystic energy to force back the youth who chased after them. He knitted his thin brows and swept him a displeased glance. "Boss!" The Luo brothers looked at him with disdain and said, "Go away, who's your boss? Hurry up. Should we help boss sit down? Boss seems to be injured too." Chapter 1687. Dao Wuji, you idiot. Stop it. Just as the peony fairy finished speaking, she saw Limitless Blade, who had just reached out to touch Mo Lianhao. Then like a ball, he was sent flying by an invisible force. The peony fairy curled her lips and threw a contemptuous look at Dao Wuji. He actually dared to reach out and touch a God State Master, who was in a fierce battle of divine sense bodies? This guy's head must have been bitten by a pig. The fact that he wasn't crippled was because he was being merciful, who didn't protect their physical body before the battle of divine sense bodies. Otherwise, what if the physical body was destroyed in the middle of the battle? Moreover, this young man who looked very powerful in front of her was really just a God State Master? A God State Master could hold on for so long under the hands of an immortal venerable and still have the upper hand? The peony fairy only felt that it was incredible. Ginkgo fairy, who was standing beside her, stared at Prince Mo without blinking with pink bubbles in her eyes. Wow, this young man is really young and powerful. The most important thing is that he is very handsome. My heart is moved, so moved. Ginkgo fairy felt that she couldn't resist the call of love and stepped into the abyss of love first. The young man in front of her was really fascinating. As soon as the peony fairy turned her head, she saw her younger sister's foolish and intoxicated look. She stretched out her foot and kicked Ginkgo fairy's butt. "Don't think about it. He just said that he has a wife." Ginkgo fairy clasped her hands and suddenly sneered. "So what if he has a wife? Even if he has a wife, I can still make him have no wife." The peony fairy thought that it was true. If that guy Yuan Shurchen told her that he had a wife, then she could also make him have no wife at any time. Thinking of this, the peony fairy touched her chin and pondered for a moment before saying, "What if you can't beat his wife?" Ginkgo fairy was stunned, as if she had never thought about this problem. Turning her head to look at her sister, Ginkgo Fairy pinched the silk handkerchief in her hand and snorted. How can I not beat her? There is no what if. The Peony Fairy thought about it and agreed. They were celestial venerables. How could they lose to a young daughter-in-law? Even thinking about it was impossible. Is it okay to bully the weak? The Peony Fairy looked at her younger sister and asked. What's wrong with that? Fairy Ginkgo roared arrogantly, and then coughed lightly, and said somewhat guiltily. It's not very good. But who asked his wife to like the same man as me? If I don't bully her, how can I get her man? At most, I'll compensate her. Fairy Ginkgo raised her chin and muttered in a low voice. The Peony Fairy nodded. All right then. As soon as he finished speaking, the young man standing opposite him suddenly opened his cold and emotionless phoenix eyes. The Peony Fairy was startled and hurriedly ran to Yuan Shurchen. Brother Yuan Shurchen. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal had been there the entire time. But he was bored watching Emolien and little Tai Sui fight. He sat in a corner and drank fake wine. That how could there be wine in the Tower of Punishment? It was illusory and tasteless. Thinking of food, the little girl's paradise planet flashed before the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal's eyes. And he sighed softly. That's really a good place. Chapter 1688. Sir, are you all right? Celestial Maiden Ginkgo walked over to Emolien with a smile. Emolien dodged and didn't say anything to her. Celestial Maiden Ginkgo's smile froze on her face. It was hard for a delicate beauty like her to greet him with a smile. But he actually turned a blind eye to her and dodged to the side. Was this man blind? At this moment, little Tai Sui opened its eyes and patted the non-existent dust off its body. It stood up and looked around with a cold expression. Then, it raised its eyebrows and frowned slightly. What are you all doing here? Who allowed you bumpkins to come to my 14th floor? Do you not want to live anymore? Little Tai Sui's angry roar startled the Luo brothers on the 10th floor, then Tuchuo on the 11th floor, Ginkgo Fairy on the 12th floor, Peony Fairy on the 13th floor, and Limitless Blade, who was enjoying the show. However, when they saw a faint wisp of divine power flowing over his palm, they knew that this child was sulking and was looking for a punching bag. Fuck. It was their fault. They had all come to the 14th floor to watch, but little Tai Sui had failed to defend the 14th floor of the Tower of Punishment. You've been humiliated. You're in a bad mood. Everyone was secretly amused and covered their mouths with their hands. Little Tai Sui's cute and handsome face scowled, and its childish voice was cold and merciless. If you don't piss off, I'll make you all hang here. Don't go down. TCH. Before Dao Wuji had a chance to provoke it, he saw Celestial Maiden Ginkgo staring at little Tai Sui with stars in her eyes. Dao Wuji couldn't help but be dumbfounded. You're looking at an 8 or 9-year-old boy with such an infatuated expression. Is it appropriate for you to not even let a child go? Little Tai Sui, let's go right away. One of the Luo brothers hurriedly said. He turned and exchanged a glance with Emolien before leading the group toward the entrance to the 15th floor. Stop right there. Little Tai Sui suddenly shouted to stop them. Everyone turned their heads helplessly, waiting for the mature voice, but the appearance of a child to reprimand him. I'll go up with you. Everyone! Exclamation point. Then why did you waste so much time talking to Emolien and hit her for 3 days and 2 nights? Was that a joke? Wouldn't it have been better if he had let them go earlier? Little Tai Sui silently glanced at Emolien and said with a mature expression, This venerable is just a little curious. I wonder if you can pass the 15th floor. Can you reveal who is guarding the 15th floor? Hee. Little Tai Sui sneered and glanced at Dao Wuji who was speaking. You failed to challenge the 13th floor, and now you're just following others. What right do you have to ask me so many questions? Get lost. Wuji Dao was speechless. The child's cold eyes told Dao Wuji a fact. People who freeload had no human rights. How infuriating. He really wanted to grab this kid who was scolding him with a straight face and give him a good beating. Emolien's team seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. Now, all the guardians from the 10th floor to the 14th floor were following behind them. Each and every one of them had the expression of a spectator. With the addition of Dao Wuji and Ma Shurchen, this team had quite a sizable number. When everyone arrived at the 15th floor, and saw that it was completely empty, they all became wary. Catch up on the latest chapter after waking up. Chapter 1689. Little Tai Sui coldly glanced at Dao Wuji, the Luo brothers, and the others. He snorted and said to everyone in a very annoying voice, "There's no need to look. There are no guardians on this floor." Huh. Dao Wuji turned to look at little Tai Sui in disbelief. How is that possible? There was a guardian on every floor of the 17 floors of the Tower of Punishment. This was a rule. Suddenly, there was no guardian on the 15th floor. Dao Wuji couldn't accept it. Happiness came so suddenly. Without a guardian, did that mean they could directly go to the 16th floor? Ha ha ha. Then he turned to look at Prince Mo's cold and unperturbed expression. Dao Wuji couldn't help but think to himself, boss is boss. Even if he's happy, he won't show it on his face. Little Tai Sui clearly saw the meaning in Dao Wuji's silly eyes. He sneered at him. Don't be happy too early. None of you will be able to pass this floor. Although there were no guardians, there was a formation. This 10,000-year talisman formation will let you have a taste of joy. From the moment you set foot on the 15th floor, everyone has already entered the formation. Little Tai Sui reminded coldly. I wish you good luck. Formation? Dao Wuji and the others looked around in confusion. It was still the same empty 15th floor. There was no sign of anything strange. At this moment, Emolienne, who was standing in the crowd, suddenly summoned 3 purple flames from her fingers. She threw them at the people around her expressionlessly. Whoosh! The flames rose. Boundless Blade, who had been chattering away beside Emolienne, turned into a wisp of black energy amidst the flames, and slipped away with a whoosh. It turned out that when Emolienne and the others reached the 15th floor of the Tower of Punishment, everyone had already entered the formation, just as little Tai Sui said. Moreover, they were separated by the formation. The teammates around him were not real teammates. They were just illusions created by the formation. It was only because little Tai Sui had specially reminded him that Crown Prince Emo abruptly came to his senses. Of course, whether or not Boundless Blade and those other people's pig brains had thought of this was not something Crown Prince Emo could care about right now. The scene before Prince Mo's eyes had already changed. He, who was originally standing in an empty tower, now appeared in a spacious hall. Inside the hall, there was a 7-story platform, and on top of it was a white jade throne carved with a dragon and inlaid with gold. There were incense tables on both sides of the room, and sandalwood was burning in the burner. As far as the eye could see, it was shrouded in smoke, giving off a solemn and dignified feeling. But this was not the main point. The important thing was the little girl behind the throne. He was no more than 7 years old, and was kneeling on the ground with his back facing him. He seemed to be very busy. He saw that her sleeves were rolled up to the crook of her arm, revealing 2 fair and tender arms. Only when he got closer did he see clearly what this little fellow was busy with. She was putting pieces of gold bars as wide as her palm into a floral package. A strange feeling slid through Crown Prince Mo's heart. This back view, that why did she look so much like his baby, that a bad premonition suddenly arose in his heart. He had already walked around to the back of the platform. This time, he could clearly see that it was not just one little girl who was busy. There were clearly 8, 9, or 10 little girls who were all busy moving gold bars. Some were standing, some were sitting, some were lying down, some were crawling. Every single one of them was working so hard to pack the gold bars. This chapter adds to yesterday's drop. Chapter 1690. There was no longer any facial paralysis on those little faces. Instead, every face was filled with joyful smiles. Prince Emma was stunned for a moment. Where did all these babies come from? When one of them finished packing a bundle of gold bars, the other one helped put the bundle on her back. That heavy gold bar immediately pressed down on the little fellow's body, and she was pressed down by the gold bar. Prince Emo did not even think as he walked over. He quickly bent down to pick up the bundle on her back. Who would have thought that the little thing would be so overbearing? She hugged the bundle on her back and angrily glared at him with accusatory eyes. That's not it. This prince did not want to steal your bundle. More than a dozen little fellows with short arms and legs swarmed over. Some hugged his legs and pulled his robes, some jumped on his back and pulled his hair, and some even grabbed his hand and bit it. It was like he had done something unforgivable. In reality, he had seen that the bundle was pressing down on this baby until she almost fainted, so he was kind enough to take it for her. Emolian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What kind of illusion was this? This strange illusion? How could there be so many 7-year-old Jojo? This kind of illusion, what was it testing him for? Crown Prince Emo sighed as he pulled down the string of Qiao Qiao, hanging on his body one by one, arranging them neatly one by one. Looking at this group of little fellows, they were all staring at him with the same expression. Without knowing why, Prince Emo felt that it was very funny. After rubbing one's head, then the other's head, Crown Prince Emo probed. How about I help you move it? Where do you want to move to? One of the little Jojo stood up, followed by the second one, then the third and fourth, forming a line. Prince Mo's lips twitched. 2 Jojo ran forward at the same time to grab the bundle of gold bars on the ground. Crown Prince Emo followed over and picked up all the bundles on the ground. When he saw that the group of little Qiao Qiao was about to dash over to attack him again, he hastily retreated and said, both amused and exasperated, I'll help you move them over. Lead the way. The leading Jojo looked at him suspiciously. With a wave of his little hand, he turned around and led the group of Jojo to the back of the hall. Crown Prince Emo quickly followed after her. A group of short-limbed little Jojos ran in front of him, turning their heads to look at him from time to time. When the group arrived at the back of the hall, Prince Emo realized that most of the space in the back of the hall was filled with gold bars. 17 or 18 Jojos were hanging on the small mountain of gold bars, their expressions different as they caressed the gold bars, their eyes filled with intoxication. This. Prince Emo almost burst out laughing. That's right, when they first met, the 7-year-old Jojo was always a little money grubber. Where do I put it? Prince Emo followed the leading little Jojo and put the bundle in the place she pointed out. Could it be that this glyph formation was testing his resistance to Jojo? Was there a need to test it? There was definitely no need. At this time, Yuan Shurchen, who entered the glyph formation with him, had already come out of the first glyph formation illusion. Looking at the golden hall and gold and silver that had disappeared behind her, Yuan Shurchen understood that the first glyph formation illusion was meant to test a person's resistance to money. For the Crown Prince, this shouldn't be a big problem. Chapter 1691. Northern Prince Emo was in a high position. What did he not have? Naturally, he would not be blinded by a little bit of wealth. However, what Hu Shurchen did not know was that Prince Emo had really been left behind in the Hall of Wealth. It was not that he was blinded by the wealth, but that pile of babies was really lively and charming. Prince Emo was personally moving gold bars for the babies. It was hard for Hu Shurchen to remember him after exiting the first layer of the formation illusion. Then he entered the second layer of the formation. This time the world spun. When Hu Shurchen woke up, it was already dusk. He was in the clouds and did not know where he was. He could only hear the noise of the bustling street. There was a faint voice in the bottom of his heart that warned him not to be blinded, not to be. Gongzi, what kind of beauty does this tower not have? Gongzi, quickly come up and take a look, Gongzi. The corner of Hu Shurchen's mouth twitched. He felt that his sleeve was being tugged by a soft little hand. Lowering his head, he saw a 7 or 8-year-old little girl with a pale little face. She was using her little hand to tug at his sleeve and looking at him pitifully. At first glance, Ma Shurchen felt that this little lass looked somewhat familiar. These eyebrows, this little nose, this little mouth. Wasn't she a miniature version of Jojo? Hu Shurchen instantly felt sweat on his forehead. What kind of formation illusion was this? Could it be that it could extract part of his memories and tamper with them as it pleased? Big brother, someone is chasing after me. Help me. Hu Shurchen turned his head to take a look. Indeed, he saw 4 or 5 extremely fierce and burly men running towards him. Although he was very clear that he was definitely in another layer of illusion, his emotions actually won over his reason. Without thinking, he reached out and picked up the little guy, quickly leaving. At this time, The bunch of JoJo who were reluctantly hugging Prince Mo's leg were crying and complaining with tears in their eyes. One after another, they looked at the crown prince who was about to abandon them and leave. "I've already moved the gold mountains for you," Prince Mo said helplessly. "If we don't leave now, we'll be trapped here forever by this talisman array." A bunch of JoJo were crying, and the scene was very lively. Prince Mo regretted that he did not have the time now. Otherwise, he would have drawn them all up so that he could show his JoJo in the future. Prince Mo glanced at the mountain of gold that filled the entire back of the palace, then calmly retracted his gaze. When he lifted his foot and walked out of the hall, he turned around and saw that the magnificent hall had already turned into a pile of ashes. He could not help but sigh in his heart. This glyph array seemed a little interesting. As soon as he entered the formation, he drew out the person he wanted to see in the void. He was almost fooled by this array, and stayed here to carry the gold bars for the JoJo, that he wasn't greedy for wealth. Instead, he was truly greedy for the happy expressions of the JoJo when they were hanging on the gold bars. Leaving the Hall of Wealth, he did not know what else was waiting for him. Prince Mo's lips curled up slightly. He suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness all over his body. His entire body was falling with the sound of the wind by his ears. "Big brother, someone is chasing after me. Help me." If Emolienne could see Hu Shurchen's illusion, she would definitely be shocked to find that the two of them were going through the same illusion one after the other. Chapter 1692. Picking up the little princess who was being hunted down on the streets, bringing her back to raise, helping her defeat her ambitious siblings, grooming her, and helping her ascend to the throne of the little queen. This series of events happened naturally. Everything was inexplicable. Many times, Hu Shurchen almost couldn't remember where she was. Was she living in an illusion, or was she living in reality? This dreamlike talisman matrix was too torturous. Emolienne started to admire the master who made this talisman matrix. He was definitely a talisman master who stood out from the rest. This talisman matrix could even bring them into a completely different world. This world had a predetermined development routine. Starting from the time he picked up the little princess who was wandering, the story developed step by step in its own direction. According to the direction of the story in this talisman matrix, Emolienne would eventually kill this little puppet queen and ascend to the throne himself. However, this talisman matrix master was looking down on him too much. He simply didn't care about the throne of such a small country. Moreover, this little queen's face looked too much like his family's JoJo, compared to the bunch of lively and extremely interesting JoJo he encountered in the Hall of Wealth. The one in front of him was the normal deadpan baby. Following the flow of the story in this talisman matrix, Emolienne felt like he had spent 3 years. But in reality, he was very clear that he had only spent about 3 days in this damn talisman matrix on the 15th floor. This talisman matrix probably wanted to test his yearning for power. Unfortunately, he simply didn't have that kind of thing. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if he had the heart to fight for power and profit, how could he lay his hands on this little deadpan baby? He also didn't know what the hell this talisman matrix was up to. Why did it always give him JoJo's appearance? Could it be because he missed her too much, because he thought about her in the day and dreamed about her at night? Achoo! Arbor sat on a simple wooden bed and raised his hand to rub his slightly red nose. Why was someone thinking about him again? Xiaomu put down her cross-legged legs and jumped down from the wooden bed. The wooden door creaked open, and Qi Xinxian walked in with a wooden basin in her arms. She couldn't help but shout, "Oh my god, it's so hot outside. JoJo, quick, give me some more ice. I'm going to take a battle bath. Would you like a cup of spirit tea?" Qi Xinxian hurriedly turned around to take a look. She closed the door and shook her head. "Don't. It's better for us to keep a low profile. Don't let the teachers find out. We drank spirit tea during the entrance exam." After all, he had only been in the academy for 2 days, and had yet to complete the normal admission procedures. He could face the danger of being kicked out of the academy at any time. If that one-track-minded teacher Wei Wei were to discover anything, he might really be chased out. Arbor glared at her. With a wave of his little hand, he threw a few ice balls into her wooden basin. Go wash up. Qi Xianxian beamed with joy as she nodded her head. Then, she carried the wooden basin and walked out. It wasn't that she wanted to complain about this academy, but the environment was really terrible. It was built on top of the lava mountain range. Not to mention how hot it was every day. It was said that Qi Xianxian, and Little Fatty each had their own room to live in, and it was guaranteed that they would live comfortably. In the end, when they got it, it became like this. Chapter 1693. Not to mention the furnishings in the room. Even the bed and chair were extremely old. Looking at the mud walls, they were full of holes and looked like they had not been repaired for a long time. There was nothing in the room, nothing at all. When Arbor had just moved in 2 days ago, the wooden bed was dirty, and there was not even a mattress. Luckily, she had packed a lot of daily necessities in the storage talisman. After making a comfortable bed for herself, she was able to lend 2 mattresses for Little Fatty and Qi Xianxian. Chow chow. Little Fatty's voice called out to her from outside. Arbor opened the door and saw Little Fatty, who was sweating profusely, walking over. As he walked, he said, "Principal Yun is back. Instructor Wei Wei asked us to gather in front of the academy peak. Hee, we can finally register for admission." Little Fatty rubbed the back of his head and laughed. He had been waiting for this day for so long that his eyes were about to tear. The other 2 senior brothers from the 2nd year, and the senior brother from the 3rd year, have also returned. Soon, everyone will be able to meet each other, Little Fatty said excitedly. From what Mata said, those 3 senior brothers are all talented people. Compared to senior brother Duanmu, they are not inferior at all. Speaking of which, this top-notch academy was really hilarious. It was obviously called Top-Notch Academy, but it did not seem to be top-notch at all. Previously, before they came to participate in the entrance examination, the total number of students in the academy did not exceed 5. There were 3 in the 2nd year, including Mata, and 2 in the 3rd year. The saying that there were no more than 3 students in a year was completely true. Because until now, even if Arbor and the other 2 were included, the number of students in the entire academy could be counted with one's fingers. In this Shuntian prefecture continent, which academy would not have more than 10 students? It was a top-notch academy. If they randomly pulled a small academy over and compared it with a top-notch academy, the number of students in the top-notch academy would be reduced in a matter of minutes. No matter how small the academy was, it should have more than 100 students, right? However, the top-notch academy was different. In 3 years, it had only recruited 9 students. It was said that one of the students had even left the academy. Because of this, he had gotten into an argument with the academy's instructor. Of the 103 peaks in the lava mountain range, only a few were habitable. Aside from the Cloudmoat Cliff where the dean lived, the instructors all lived on the instructor's peak. Regardless of whether it was studying or living, the students lived on the academy's peak. Therefore, there were actually quite a lot of small mud houses on the academy peak. To the outside world, the living conditions of the top academies were extremely good. Every student had their own small room. But could this little mud hut be considered a luxurious room? Arbor walked out of her little mud house and said to Little Fatty, "Xian hasn't arrived yet. You go ahead first, I'll wait for her here." Little Fatty thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, "I'd better go with you." As he spoke, he saw Mata running over with a cheeky smile. He looked at them and said, "What are you waiting for? Let's go." Teacher Wei Wei said that he has something important to announce today. "I'm waiting for Xian." Little Fatty glanced at him. "What's the big announcement?" "I don't know. Teacher didn't say. But even if I use my butt to think, I know that it's definitely closely related to our future training." TSK. Little Fatty snorted disdainfully. He couldn't be bothered to listen to Mata's nonsense. Chapter 1694. About 15 minutes later, Qi Xianxian came out of the room and saw Mata's perverted gaze. She screamed instinctively and lowered her head to look at herself. "Damn, my clothes are neat and tidy. There's nothing to be alarmed about. It's all Mata's fault. He always looks at people from the bottom up." His eyes are especially perverted. He had a handsome face, but he had a pair of perverted eyes. What are you looking at? Qi Xianxian glared at Mata angrily. She turned around and walked towards Arbor. Qi Xianxian held Arbor's arm and looked at them in confusion. What's wrong? Are you all waiting for me here? Fatty nodded vigorously. Let's go. We're going to the front of the academy peak. Dean Yinxiong is back. A few seniors are here too. Mata said that the teachers have something important to announce today. Oh. Qi Xianxian shrugged. She held Arbor's arm and said softly. Could it be that Wei Wei slandered us in front of the dean? This guy had been holding a grudge against Jojo for using a storage talisman in the entrance test until now. Arbor said calmly, let him do whatever he wants. They went to the front of the Academy Peak's main hall. Other than Duan Muqing, there were 3 other men standing there. These 3 people should be the senior brothers of the 2nd and 3rd years of the academy. Looking at them, they should be around 25 years old. Arbor was very familiar with one of them. When they first met, it was the man in green who drew a circle on the ground with Arbor. It was Hua Tao. When the other 2 second-year senior brothers, Jiang Shaoxin and Lu Yu, saw that everyone was walking over under Mata's lead, they also nodded at Xiao Mu and the others in acknowledgement. All right, everyone's here, Teacher Wei Wei said calmly. The 3 new students come over here to register. From today onwards, the 3 of you are official students of our top academy. Dean Yinxiong seemed very happy. The smile on Dean Yinzhou's face deepened. He was simply letting the little girl get in based on her own ability and knowledge, instead of opening a door for her. It was hard for people to dislike such a young genius. Today, I'm not only here to welcome the 3 new students, Instructor Wei Wei continued. I have another important announcement to make. Including the 3 new students, the academy has a total of 8 people. In order to better hone your temperament and willpower, the academy has decided to abolish grades. The 8 of you will be divided into 2 groups. Everyone will start from 0 to accumulate academy points. In 3 months, those who are able to obtain more than 1,000 points will be qualified to participate in the school league. Only those who obtain 3,000 points in a year can graduate successfully. The points will be reset to 0 after the new year. In other words, if they couldn't save up 3,000 points in a year, they would have to continue learning in this lousy academy. He would continue to study for an indefinite amount of time. Little Fatty, Qi Xianxian, and Arbor looked at each other silently. Arbor immediately regretted his decision. Wasn't this academy a little too unreliable? What did it mean to be divided into 2 groups? So in the future, when they did missions, they would have to face seniors from the higher years. Also, this point system would definitely be very fraudulent. Arbor had a headache just thinking about it. In the future, they would have to walk on a rugged path of desperately earning points. Chapter 1695. The academy was definitely up to no good. There would definitely be competition between the 2 teams. And the team that lost would probably not be able to obtain any points. Wei Wei said indifferently. If you don't have any objections, come over and pay the fees. Everyone will pay 20 spirit coins once every 3 months. If you want to pay in advance, you can do so as well. I'll pay in advance. Who knows if I can stay in your academy for the full 3 months? Arbor glanced at Qi Xianxian, who was looking at her anxiously, and reluctantly went forward to pay the fees. Oh, if you pay the fees but don't listen to the teachings of the instructors, and even have delusions of running away from the academy, then the academy will be responsible for you. The vice principal will beat you until you start doubting your life. Arbor was speechless. She raised her head and looked at the flower-like and kind-looking fat vice principal. Arbor and the other students looked at each other, feeling as if they had fallen into a trap. All right, the fees have been paid. Next, I'll talk about the training goals for the next 3 months. Arbor was still hesitating when a short instructor ran forward and snatched the money bag from her hands, winking at her. Miss Chiao was furious. She hadn't thought it through. Qi Xianxian secretly grinned and thought to herself, this instructor Zhou is really a clown. All right, you guys can split into 2 groups first. The short instructor grinned. The 3 seniors who were familiar with each other naturally gathered together. However, What surprised them was that Mata and Duanmu Qing actually stood with the three freshmen and didn't rush over to their side. "One of you go over." The short instructor roared at Mata. Mata immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. What a joke. He didn't want to leave Miss Chiao's team. He felt that if he stood with Arbor's team, he would definitely be in trouble. "We are in the same team," Mata hurriedly said. "Duanmu, you go over." Duanmu Qing shook his head. "I'm not going." Wei Wei was angered to the point of laughter. It seemed that these three freshmen had become extremely popular, right? "Then let's draw lots." Principal Yin smiled faintly. Qi Xianxian immediately hugged Arbor's arm nervously and roared at Mata. "You go over." "No, no, no." Arbor suddenly raised her head. She narrowed her eyes and looked at a streak of light that suddenly flew over from afar. She reached out her hand, and a piece of ebony talisman turned into ashes in her palm. Arbor's black pupils were as calm as an ancient well. Suddenly, he turned around and said to Principal Yin, "Excuse me for a moment." One day, Principal Yin and the 5 instructors were stunned. When they looked up, Arbor had already summoned a blue bird. With a whoosh, he landed on the blue bird and flew down the mountain. "Jojo, where are you going?" Qi Xianxian was startled and hurriedly shouted at Arbor's departing figure. "Kill." A calm and indifferent voice came into everyone's ears from afar, causing them to feel a chill in their hearts. "Dean." Instructor Wei Wei looked at Dean Yun with a solemn expression. Wasn't this little girl too unruly? Dean Yun smiled and said, "It's okay, she will come back." Who hadn't been hot-blooded when they were young? Haha. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They felt that the dean was being too lenient with the little girl. Dean Yun smiled. "You guys go draw lots first. I will go out for a moment." The little girl running out alone was naturally not reassuring. He planned to follow her and take a look. Chapter 1696. Of course, Yun Fiang would never tell them that he was only there to watch the show, that he had a feeling that the little girl was going to do something earth-shattering this time. Strange. Why was he looking forward to it? Back to Arbor. After leaving the academy peak on the Blue Phoenix, she rushed toward the location indicated by the tracking talisman. Before the tracking talisman disappeared, it had already transmitted Tan Fa's location to her accurately. It was not very far. The Blue Phoenix could make a round trip in one day. Most importantly, she was very familiar with Tan Fa's hiding place. It was the place where Ma Ta gave Qi Xianxian a trashy map, which made them look for a top academy on an unknown mountain, and where they met the little fatty later. She had just learned that the mountain was called Chi Mountain. It was outside Anka City, in the opposite direction of the lava mountain. Xiaomu pursed her small lips and apathetically twisted open her defensive ring. She then added a defensive barrier to herself, isolating herself from the howling gales outside. She held the gold-beaded talisman pen in her right hand, and 3 blank ebony talismans floated in front of her. After a few strokes, she drew 3 puppet talismans smoothly. Then, more than 10 blank ebony talismans floated in front of her again, and quickly turned into talismans under her drawing. Or rather talismans. After more than 10 yellow-level Mystic Een talismans were completed, Arbor's lips curled into a cold smile. Talismans made by a yellow-level Great Talisman Master. You're lucky. It had only been 3 days since Tan Fa escaped from the Space Talisman Array with Che Ruan, and Arbor had followed the man with the tracking talisman. She knew that as long as the monkey-faced man did not escape from the Shuntiang continent, she would definitely find him in 3 days. What Arbor did not expect was that the guy was quite cunning. He did not run far before he settled down at Chi Mountain outside Anka City. Of course, maybe it was because the talisman power in the Space Talisman Array was getting weaker and weaker, and it was not enough to teleport him too far. Maybe Tan Fa was only forced to rest at Chi Mountain temporarily. Qinghuan stopped above the lush Chi Mountain and turned its head to look at Xiao Mu. "Master, it's not easy to fly here with the dense foliage." "Yes." Arbor nodded and signaled for Qinghuan to descend. He reached out and stroked Qinghuan's head, allowing it to return to Paradise Planet. She wanted to go alone, but before she could take 2 steps, she found a big furry fellow beside her, rubbing her little hand. Arbor's eyes lit up. How could she forget about little Snow? Speaking of which, ever since she had left the lava mountain range that day, in front of a crowd of dumbfounded people, she had calmly put little Snow away. Then, she had let little Snow live on Paradise Planet, and didn't really care about it. Now that they were running in this huge forest, little Snow was the most suitable. Its speed was very fast, and its 4 limbs were very strong. Sitting on little Snow's back, he only felt the wind whistling past his ears. His body was very stable without the slightest bump. Arbor reached out to pinch the snow leopard's ear and pointed. One man and one beast stopped in front of a cave in the depths of the forest. This cave was really hidden. The front of the cave was filled with withered branches and weeds. A row of jujube trees was planted in front of the cave, but they were all drooping and withered. If one did not look carefully, it was really impossible to notice that there was a cave in the stone wall here. As soon as they approached, they could smell a faint smell of blood. Arbor frowned slightly. Chapter 1697. Oh. Arbor wondered what Tan-Fa was up to create such a strong smell of blood. Even Arbor frowned when she smelled it. Arbor patted the snow leopard's head to comfort it. She bent down and picked up the snow leopard that had shrunk into her arms. Then, she leisurely walked into the cave. The entire cave looked extremely gloomy from the outside. When she stepped in, she saw that there were 3 or 4 dim yellow lamps on the walls of the cave. The cave was empty except for a small bonfire in the corner. A small pot of boiling water was hanging from a frame. Next to it was a bunch of chopped branches. Arbor's gaze moved to the center of the cave. There was a large grayish-brown urn. The strange smell of blood was coming from the urn. Arbor walked to the front of the urn unhurriedly. The closer she got to the urn, the heavier the smell of blood became. It was extremely unpleasant. Xiao Mu's eyes flickered, and she heard a mocking laugh coming from the cave entrance. "Heya, what a rare guest, what a rare guest. Miss Xiao has graced us with your presence. How should Tan-Fa welcome you?" Arbor turned her head with a cold expression. She saw that Tan-Fa's small eyes were staring at her with a strange light. "How did you find me?" Arbor looked at him with a cold expression. She was somewhat puzzled. How did Tan-Fa's injuries heal so quickly? 3 days ago, he had clearly been turned into a dog by her backlash. Why was it that when they met again, he was as lively as a dragon and as lively as a tiger? As if he had not suffered the slightest bit of backlash. Arbor's finger suddenly moved. She smashed the mystic guiding glyph array on herself, and threw a binding glyph array at the entrance of the cave. Tan-Fa's pupil shrank. He immediately dodged to the side. Unexpectedly, he heard a bestial roar. A white light suddenly rushed to his side. With his many years of battle experience, Tan-Fa suddenly had a bad premonition. He made a prompt decision and rolled to the side. This avoided little Snow's sudden bite. When one's life was hanging by a thread, everyone had an instinctive reaction to survive. Tan-Fa was no exception. However, just as he dodged the snow leopard's white teeth, Miss Xiao's puppet talisman arrived as well. What? Shocked, Tan-Fa hurriedly threw out a dozen yellow-ranked defensive talismans to defend himself. The yellow-level defensive talisman was naturally very effective. Seeing that the puppet talisman he threw was blocked, Arbor didn't waste his energy. He directly recalled the puppet talisman and threw out a dozen more Xianin talismans. "You're a talisman master." Tan-Fa finally discovered something that made him shocked. The young girl in front of him was not a normal talisman master. She knew how to draw talismans. The dozen or so Xianin talismans that she threw out were actually smoother and more natural than his grandmaster's. Why? Tan-Fa's heart slightly tightened, and he quickly rushed towards the large urn in the middle of the cave. "Although you are a rare charm master in the world, but today, you must die in this unknown cave. Haha. I don't care if you become my human cauldron or my puppet ghost spirit. Miss Xiao, you can only blame yourself for not wanting to walk the path to heaven. There's no door to hell, yet you insist." Ow. Before Tan-Fa could finish his string of self-righteous nonsense, he discovered that he had been sent flying to the top of the cave by a huge tail. How was this possible? Even if he was beaten to death, he wouldn't dare believe that he had been slapped to the sky by this young girl before he could finish speaking. The 6th watch will be finished. However, it will be very late, so don't wait for me. Chapter 1698. Arbor expressionlessly looked at Tan Fa, who had been whipped into the air by the little white squirrel's tail, coldly curling her lips. Then, he rushed to Tan Fa's side with a big stride. With a flick of his finger, a puppet charm suddenly entered Tan Fa's consciousness. Tan Fa vigilantly opened his eyes wide. The sentence, "What did you do?" had only been uttered 3 words when he suddenly felt that his conscience seemed to have been poured in by a surge of power, directly tearing it apart. His entire body was in so much pain that he immediately fell to the ground, hugging his head and rolling back and forth on the ground. Arbor didn't care about him, sauntering forward, kicking open the lid of the large urn. Inside was Che Ruman's deathly pale face, which didn't surprise her in the slightest. Charm masters had always been sinister, which was why they were despised and intolerable by the world. However, in reality, the more the charm masters were despised by the world, the more perverted and frightening their actions were. At this time, Che Ruman's eyes were gouged out, her tongue cut, unable to make the slightest sound. Although her 4 limbs weren't chopped off, but looking at her limp appearance, she already didn't have the tendons in her arms and legs all snapped, without the slightest strength to resist. There was a thick smell of blood in the large urn. The urn was covered with sheets of charms drawn with blood. Arbor roughly looked around. This was an extremely vicious forbidden spell, disgraced by the righteous charm masters. Regardless of gender, as long as the person was placed in a container covered with blood charms, and the power of the curse seeped into the person's body, it would have the effect of the blood curse. This kind of blood curse was really very nourishing for the person who drew it. Within 49 days, it could endlessly absorb the essence, energy, and vitality of the person under the curse. No wonder this damned man, in less than 3 days' time, was able to walk out from the previous serious injury of the backlash. It turned out that he had absorbed Che Ruman's power. Of course, the backlash and side effects of this kind of blood charms were very obvious. Once the absorption was interrupted midway, not only would one suffer an extremely disastrous backlash, but it would also cause the person who drew the curse to lose their cultivation to 0 for 7 days. What's more, if they went for wool and came home shorn, it would cause their bodily functions to deteriorate rapidly, and some of them would even be worse than their original body. And now, what Arbor wanted to do was to let this insidious man in front of him reap what he sowed. The man whose conscience was injured was rolling around on the ground. He suddenly raised his head and saw Arbor looking back at him coldly. His heart skipped a beat. Tan Fa stretched out a hand and let out a sharp cry that even he couldn't understand. Wait! Arbor's small hand, which was covered with a layer of Vajra talisman, directly grabbed Che Ruman's hair, lifted her out of the big urn, and casually threw her aside. A light flashed in her hand, and an ordinary-looking iron hoe appeared in her hand. Clang! With a swing of the hoe, the big urn was completely smashed into pieces. Tan Fa let out a blood-curdling scream as he spat out a large pool of blood from his mouth. Arbor didn't even bother to look back, and directly used the hoe to smash the big urn into smithereens, completely destroying those blood charms stuck on the urn. Tan Fa collapsed on the ground, his face full of disbelief. He probably didn't expect that in just a few minutes, he was about to be killed by this savage little girl in front of him. Chapter 1699. Didn't the words he had said earlier just invite a series of jokes? He actually wanted to capture this young girl, with such a high cultivation base, and use her as a cauldron or vessel to increase his power, or just kill her and slowly nurture her into a ghost spirit. But he didn't expect that he would be defeated so miserably today, without even a chance to retaliate. Cough, cough, cough. Cough. The explosive pain in his conscience, in addition to the blood curse being interrupted midway, caused him to once again be engulfed by the power of the backlash, and his cultivation base was completely lost. The current Tan Fa only needed one finger from Miss Chow to crush him to death. Cough, cough. I didn't expect you to be such a righteous person. You actually risked your life to save Che Ruman. Tan Fa said through gritted teeth. Today's events were so sudden that he really didn't expect Miss Qiao to find his hidden hiding place. Moreover, he didn't expect that this little girl in front of him was actually a curse master at such a young age. The little girl had been using the techniques of a curse master to fight with him. She looked so arrogant because she wanted to let him know that in terms of the art of curses, he Tan Fa, who had studied for so many years, couldn't compare to this damned girl. After a long sigh, Tan Fa collapsed on the ground, feeling that his head was still faintly throbbing in pain. He resisted the sharp pain in his conscience and forced himself to sit up. Looking at Arbor, he said softly, "Miss Qiao, I'm sincerely convinced by you." Cough, cough, cough. "Seeing that we're both from the Tao of Curses, you should be magnanimous and let me go. Come. I can use a treasure that you definitely can't imagine in exchange for my life." Tan Fa's vulgar eyes flashed slightly, and he said in a low voice, "With this kind of treasure, I can guarantee that you'll be even stronger than before." What responded to him wasn't Arbor's joyful appearance, but a poisoned dart that flew straight for his throat. Tan Fa rolled on the ground in a sorry state, but he still couldn't completely avoid that poisoned dart. The poisonous dart landed on his shoulder, and in a split second, the terrifying poisonous gas converged into a black line from his shoulder and rapidly spread towards her limbs. Tan Fa's eyes widened in horror. He suddenly raised his head and glared at Arbor. You, why did you do this to me?" Arbor didn't even look at him. He threw a look at Snowy. The snow leopard roared and rushed forward. It slapped Tan Fa's head with its paw, and its sharp claws ripped off half of his head on the spot. Even until his death, Tan Fa still couldn't understand how this savage little girl could act so unconventionally. He hadn't even finished telling her about the baby. How could she be so impatient as to reach out and slap him to death? Didn't she want to ask who he was? Why would he appear here? Tan Fa was completely dead. He couldn't be more dead. His eyes were tightly shut, and half of his skull was exposed. Arbor looked up at Tan Fa and said coldly, "My master once told me, don't talk nonsense when you're fighting. Just go straight up. Don't talk nonsense when you're crippled. You can't imagine the strength of a dying person's counterattack." In the depths of Arbor's memory, the image of Xian Huang holding her little hand and earnestly teaching her appeared. Chapter 1700. She couldn't help but stare blankly. Arbor thought. This scene that suddenly appeared seemed to be yesterday, appearing in front of her eyes, vivid and clear. Did she remember the time when she was with Master? Frowning and lowering her little head, Arbor racked her brain for a long time and couldn't help but sigh in disappointment. Her brain was so stupid. She could forget such an important thing. What a pighead. Arbor raised her hand and knocked her little head, turning her head to look at Che Rumen, who was lying motionless in the corner. She quickly walked forward and narrowed her eyes to take a look. Che Rumen was facing the sky. Her unfocused eyes were already dilated and dilated. She was already dead. But this was normal. Ever since Tan Fa put the blood curse on Che Rumen, her life and cultivation were closely linked to Tan Fa. Tan Fa was dead, so she couldn't survive alone. And with her current state, there wouldn't be any happiness, even if she forced herself to live. Arbor walked back to Tan Fa's corpse with half of his head, and looked at him with disdain. Only then did she mobilize all of her spiritual sense, penetrating and seizing the other's consciousness and inner world. Tan Fa's inner world was very rich in resources, and Arbor obtained a lot of resources from Tan Fa's inner world, including spiritual medicine, spirit stones, and some cultivation resources, as well as a few ores and refining materials. Arbor didn't expect Tan Fa, this wretched man, to be so good at accumulating wealth. But thinking about it, as a yellow-level charm master, Tan Fa's speed of accumulating wealth shouldn't be any slower than a charm master. After Arbor finished tidying up some of Tan Fa's supplies, she glanced at a pinkish-purple jade pendant that fell on the ground from the corner of her eye. Arbor bent down to pick up the jade pendant. Turning it around, she just happened to see the 3 words Clear Sky Gate engraved on the back. Her eyes immediately turned cold, and she lightly read out these 3 words. Clear Sky Gate. Wasn't that the clear sky gate where Fan Gu was the vice leader? To tell the truth, ever since that Fan Gu took her nephew Fan Xiuha and fled back to Shuntiang continent, she had always been thinking about them in her heart. Great. She hadn't even gone to their door to settle the score with this aunt and niece pair. And now they had already sent a vanguard to test the waters. Arbor's lips curled into a sneer. He flipped through some of the talismans that Tan Fa had placed in his inner world. There weren't many of them, only a dozen or so. Most of them were Xianing talismans. In reality, whether it was a symbol charm master or a symbol charm master, it was impossible for their drawing speed to be too fast. Ordinary talisman masters and talisman curse masters could draw 10 or so blue talismans in a day. They could already be considered experts with an extremely high success rate. Unlike Arbor, which had already reached a 100% success rate in forming blue talismans. After putting away these talismans, Xiaomu discovered that there was also a small, squarish, red wooden box underneath these talisman papers. When he opened it, he saw a small black bead that looked like an ordinary wooden carving. It didn't emit any light at all. Arbor only felt curious, seeing how Tan Fa had hidden this black bead so preciously in the wooden box. Arbor roughly knew that this little plaything was perhaps the unexpected treasure that Tan Fa had mentioned. But what exactly was the use of this plaything? Master, this is a ghost spirit bead. The little tree Chocho's strange voice suddenly sounded in her ears. What was a ghost spirit bead? Arbor expressed that she had never seen such a strange bead. Chapter 1701. Master, why don't you use your spiritual awareness to open it? It's possible that the charm master from earlier had put some kind of ghost spirit inside. Arbor was taken aback, but she nodded and used her spiritual awareness to enter this ghost spirit pearl. The originally ordinary wooden ghost spirit bead suddenly emitted bursts of brilliance, extremely dazzling. When her spiritual awareness entered, she could see that there was actually a 9-layered talisman array inside the ghost spirit pearl. Each layer contained extremely strong curse power. Not to mention those wandering ghost spirits. Even if a talisman master was caught, he might not be able to break this 9-layered array and come out. Of course, this wooden pearl was most likely only able to store and release ghost spirits. Normal humans naturally could not enter. Master, there's a female ghost spirit kowtowing and greeting you. Why don't you have any reaction? Arbor was taken aback when she heard that. She turned to look at little tree squatting on her shoulder. What female ghost spirit? Where is she? Right beside your feet. Little tree looked at her speechlessly. Just now, you opened the ghost spirit pearl and let her out. Arbor was taken aback. She looked around and muttered softly. Where is this female ghost spirit? Master, you can't see it? Little tree grinned at her. Speaking of which, it was strange. She had always been in a state where she could not see ghost spirits. In the past, when she returned to Kwoto village with the little monk even opened her eyes in all seriousness. But she still could not see anything. Wait, let me use my spiritual awareness to take a look. If she could not see ghost spirits in front of her with her ordinary eyes, perhaps her spiritual awareness would be of some use. You still can't see anything? Little tree Chocho looked at Arbor curiously. Arbor withdrew her spiritual awareness gloomily and nodded. What did she say? It's nothing. She kowtowed to you all trembling. She even said that she'll listen to everything you say in the future, and won't cause you any trouble. Chocho rolled its eyes and said, this female ghost spirit looked so cowardly. What could she do by keeping her by her side? Wasn't it a waste of food? Oh, that's not right. A female ghost wouldn't waste food. Arbor put away the invisible female ghost. Blinking his eyes, he asked the small tree. Do you think the unexpected treasure that Tan Fa mentioned just now is this ghost spirit bead? That's hard to say. The little tree shook its head and said, this ghost spiritual bead's target area is extremely small. If it weren't for Master's extraordinary spiritual sense, who could reach the 4th level of spiritual sense at your level of cultivation? Arbor was stunned. He picked up the wooden ghost spirit bead and looked at it, then put it away for the time being. Little Snow chirped, let's go. Arbor waved at the fat squirrel that was jumping on a rock. The fat squirrel hurriedly ran over and jumped into Arbor's arms. Arbor hugged it and called the snow leopard out of the door. The moment the man and the two beasts walked out of the door, they heard a huge explosion that instantly flattened the entire cave. Arbor used the fire explosion talisman, so its power was naturally extraordinary. In an instant, the entire cave turned into a fiery purgatory. Looking back at the withered branches and leaves crackling under the intense fire, Arbor's lips curled into a faint sneer. Tossing a pinkish-purple jade pendant in his palm, Arbor asked Wuxia, "Do you know where the Clear Sky sect is staying?" Others had already made a move, so how could she passively take a beating? Chapter 1702. Do we have a way to find out where the Clear Sky sect's lair is? The feeling of being coveted in the dark like this really wasn't pleasant. Arbor liked to do things directly and efficiently. Since she had already identified the existence of the enemy, she naturally had to think of a way to get rid of them all. Wuxia waved two thin branches and climbed onto Arbor's shoulder. Shaking its head, it said, "We just arrived at Shuntian Prefecture and aren't too familiar with the environment here. Master, why don't you bear with it for a while? Once Wuxia establishes a certain connection with the spirits of vegetation on the Shuntian Prefecture continent, we can easily gather some useful information." That was the only way. Arbor naturally knew that some things couldn't be rushed. Wuxia had just entered the late stage of its infant stage. If she used up too much of its power, it might be so tired that it would go into seclusion again. According to her observations, this little tree was very likely the main body of the holy wood of the five spirits. Although she still didn't understand why this tree grew in her Dantian's mystic domain since her rebirth, she still didn't understand. Arbor raised her hand to rub the little Trent's head. "Let's go." Roar. The snow leopard nestled beside her suddenly roared angrily, and its huge body suddenly rushed in front of Arbor to block her. The 4 or 5 arrows that were flung in the air were all swatted away by the snow leopard's steel claws. Arbor looked coldly at the row of masked gray-clothed people who had suddenly appeared. Every single one of them used a gray veil to cover their faces and held a heavy bow in their hands. They did not hesitate to shoot at her. Don't underestimate these arrows. They weren't bows that ordinary people could draw. Each of these arrows was imbued with the spirit energy in their bodies, so their range was very long, and their speed was abnormally fast. After the snow leopard swatted away several arrows with its claws, all kinds of spirit energy exploded in the air, forming a steaming spirit mist. There were about 30 people in that row of masked gray-clothed people, and they all moved extremely quickly. Although they were slightly taken aback when they saw such a huge snow leopard, they quickly got to work again. The gray-clothed masked men rushed towards Arbor, and the bows in their hands continued to shoot arrows without delay. The arrowheads formed a rain of arrows that blotted out the sky as they rained down on Xiaomu. Arbor's eyes turned cold. Her expression didn't change as she opened her defensive barrier. With a wave of her finger, countless defensive talismans lined up in the air and surrounded her body. The row of arrows was blocked by the defensive talisman. Several of the masked men in gray had already arrived in front of Arbor, and a huge net appeared in their hands, aiming for Arbor's waist. From the looks of it, these people wanted to capture her alive? Arbor sneered and raised his eyebrows. The gray-clothed masked men in front of her were all level 4 spiritual masters. Fan Gu, the vice leader of the Clear Sky sect, had invested a lot in her. Moreover, they came too quickly, so Xiaomu could not help but be suspicious. This Fan Gu, had she been keeping an eye on her all this while? For example, Fan Gu would know the moment she went to Shuntian Prefecture. Another example was when she went to participate in the entrance exam of a top academy, and Fan Gu actually sent Tan Fa to sneak in, wanting to make her a puppet talisman and secretly kill her. Although Fan Gu didn't succeed in all of this, Arbor felt inexplicably unhappy at the thought of a damned bug trying to bite her all day long. Chapter 1703. She was inexplicably displeased, but she could only endure it for now. After all, she had just entered Shuntian Prefecture. As the saying went, Even a powerful dragon could not suppress a local snake. In the future, when she found out where their nest was, she would make them suffer. Arbor jumped onto the snow leopard's back with a flip. He narrowed his black eyes and solemnly glanced at the group of masked gray-clothed people. "Today all of you will stay here for me," Arbor said coldly, his eyes devoid of any warmth. He looked at them, as if he was looking at a group of dead people. The leader of the masked gray-clothed people couldn't help but snicker. But he didn't say anything. He merely waved his hand resolutely, and the group of spiritual cultivators threw away the bows in their hands. They each picked up their handy weapons and surrounded Arbor, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. The little fat squirrel swung its several-meter-long tail and smacked a person's head. Everyone watched helplessly as their teammate was instantly smashed into meat paste by a fat squirrel's tail. Almost all of them stopped in their tracks as their bodies stiffened slightly. The two beasts beside Miss Chow seemed to be extraordinary. The group was a bit apprehensive of the two beasts' martial prowess, so they hesitated and didn't dare to step forward for the time being. However, Arbor wouldn't be courteous to them. A thin piece of paper abruptly flew out from her conscience. Ever since the battle at the Holy Water Sect's main peak, she had never taken out this Tianji treasure blueprint to use, especially when she was only a mere level 11 mystic cultivator back then. But she had already risked her life to open the fourth layer of the Tianji treasure blueprint, and triggered it to launch an indiscriminate AoE attack. Then now, she could already easily activate the fifth and even sixth layers of the Tianji treasure blueprint. This Tianji treasure blueprint was clearly a divine weapon. Senior Tianji Z had probably stored all the concealed weapons he had made in his lifetime into this Tianji treasure blueprint. The combination of the two had enormous power. Moreover, there was a feeling of an inexhaustible supply, because this Tianji treasure blueprint itself was similar to a concealed weapon box for storing concealed weapons. Xiaomu still hadn't figured out how much capital the Tianji master had invested back then, and how many concealed weapons he had placed inside. Of course, a portion of the hidden weapons could still be recycled into the Tianji treasure blueprint. She didn't need to waste any effort. After the battle, she just needed to take out the Tianji treasure blueprint again and walk around the arena. Hidden weapons that could be used continuously, without any damage, would naturally be recalled by it. Xiao Mu had once carefully calculated that when the Tianji treasure blueprint activated its fifth layer of offense, it could currently continuously fire out 18 types of hidden weapons in a single second. Who could withstand such a wave of attacks? 1 second was just the blink of an eye. When the Tianji treasure blueprint was summoned, one would basically die on the spot. At this moment, Xiao Mu summoned this Tianji treasure blueprint out from her conscience, and she coldly swept her gaze across the 30 masked men in gray. Since she said that she would make all of these people stay, then she would naturally fulfill her promise. With a move of her mystic conscience, the Tianji treasure blueprint unfurled in front of everyone. It stretched for several meters and was enveloped in golden light. Arbor sat on the snow leopard's back and coldly gazed at the group of masked men in gray. Secretly, an endless stream of mystic conscience frantically surged into the Tianji treasure blueprint. A hint of faintly frightened expression appeared on the faces of all the masked men. Chapter 1704. In the next moment, everyone saw the Tianji treasure blueprint release streaks of dazzling light that were extremely intense and dazzling. The dazzling light formed a beam of light that directly shot into those bodies. Instantly, dozens of masked men in gray bore the brunt of the attack and were savagely torn to shreds by the dazzling light. The might of the attack was so great that the 20 masked men behind him trembled in fear when they saw it. Without even thinking about it, those gray-robed men all retreated backwards to hide. However, was that possible? How could the Tianji treasure blueprint be so easy to hide from? What awaited them was only the fate of being exterminated. When the Tianji treasure blueprint was opened, it attacked indiscriminately and directly killed nearly 200 mystic cultivators. Now these 30 spiritual cultivators paled in comparison. They were simply not enough to fill the gaps between the Tianji treasure blueprint's teeth. So what if they were spiritual cultivators? Even if Arbor did not open the Tianji treasure blueprint, These little spiritual cultivators below level 7 might not necessarily be at a disadvantage if they fought side by side with Little Snow and Qiu. She was just too lazy to do it herself anymore. Since they wanted to die so much, she would grant their wish. The leading masked man in gray broke out in a cold sweat that dripped down his forehead. However, before he could open his mouth to beg Arbor for mercy, the Tianji treasure blueprint's indiscriminate attack had already arrived in front of him. That strange beam of light caused a trace of extreme fear in his heart. What kind of hidden weapon was this? Arbor looked curiously at the hundreds of mirrors that suddenly jumped out of the Tianji treasure blueprint. These mirrors seemed to be arranged in a very orderly manner. When the light beams that intertwined with each other landed on a person's body, they could actually directly penetrate the body of a spiritual cultivator below level 4. It could be seen that Senior Tianji Z was most likely well versed in mechanisms, hidden weapons, and even formations. However, Senior Xuanji actually wanted such a powerful senior to use her strength to crush his disciple. This was truly a strange request. In the future, she really would have to make things difficult for Senior Tianji Z's personal disciple. The Tianji treasure map created by Senior Tianji Z had given her a lot of help. When she thought about how she would be forced to make things difficult for his personal disciple in the future, Miss Qiao felt a sense of indescribable emotions. By the time the late headmaster Yun arrived, Xiaomu had already set off a ring of fire outside the cave, burning those masked gray-clothed people clean before running away. Yun Fei glanced at the mountain forest that had almost been razed to the ground in astonishment. Then, he could only click his tongue in admiration. It was rare for Ah Sun's disciple to be so vicious and merciless. Looking at the burnt corpses on the ground, there were at least 30 people here. But now, those people who wanted to kill Miss Qiao had all left this world. Yun Zong sighed inwardly. After erasing all traces of Miss Qiao's presence in the area, he quietly left. When Fan Gu sent out another group of people to search the area, the news they brought back caused Fan Gu to be extremely furious. There's no trace at all. Without a trace, how could there be no trace at all? She had clearly sent out 30 level 4 spiritual cultivators to capture Arbor. So why did they disappear without a trace? Fan Gu flew into a rage, and raged within the Clear Heaven sect. Fan Qiuhe comforted her, and sent out a portion of the Clear Heaven sect disciples to secretly inquire about Arbor. However, ever since Arbor had entered the top academy, it had been difficult for news to spread. Chapter 1705. After dealing with the evil creatures of the Clear Sky faction, Arbor was naturally in a good mood. She summoned the Green Wand, and took it back to the lava mountains. The Green Wand let out a cry. As soon as it flew to the foot of the mountain, it saw a thrilling scene. 2 huge black, unknown corpse birds were attacking a caravan passing by Qiqi Mountain. The 2 corpse birds were 2/3 the size of the Green Wand. There was not a single strand of hair on their wings, leaving only bits and pieces of rotten flesh hanging on them. The 2 corpse birds were attacking the caravan, and there were casualties in the caravan. The women and children were shrieking in terror as they retreated. The leader of the caravan was a middle-aged man. He was about to lead the caravan to Anka City, but they were attacked by corpse birds before they passed by Qiqi Mountain. It was not that the caravan had not encountered dirty things like corpse puppets along the way, but the 2 corpse birds this time were so big that they could not deal with them. When the 2 corpse birds swooped down from the sky, they were so fast that they were dazzling. The 2 frightened women sat paralyzed on the ground, unable to escape at all. Just as one of the corpse birds was about to tear her arm with its claws, the sharp cry of a green wand came from the sky. A crossbow arrow with a black light shot into the corpse bird's claws with a whoosh. The 2 corpse birds let out unpleasant cries and flapped their wings to fly to the side. Arbor fired 5 consecutive arrows with her crow crossbow. Not to mention 2 corpse birds, even 4 or 5 of them would be shot down by her. There were many women and children in the caravan. They must have paid part of their supplies, and followed the caravan to Anka City for food and clothing. However, many of them did not expect that Anka City would be right in front of them, but they did not even have the chance to enter the city alive. After pressing down on Qingwan, Xiaomu jumped down gracefully from Qingwan's back. The two corpse birds lay on the side of the mountain road dying. Only their wings moved slightly. Arbor walked forward without a word, pulled out a dagger, and dug out the crystal cores in the heads of the two corpse birds. The remaining members of the caravan looked at her with pale faces and trembling lips. They didn't know why, but when they saw how skillful she was in digging out the crystal cores, they felt a little emotional. She was so young, but her little face was expressionless, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. The leader quickly walked up and cupped his fists respectfully at Xiaomu. "Honorable Miss, thank you for saving our entire caravan. If it wasn't for Arbor's help, their team would have been wiped out." Arbor just nodded at him with an indifferent expression. To be honest, she had stopped when she saw that there was a crystal core in the heads of these two corpse birds. As for saving them, it was just a matter of convenience. Therefore, whether these people thanked her or not was actually not that important to Xiaomu. "Miss, we are from the Jean Mantang mercenary group. This is just a small token of our respect." Arbor was stunned. She looked at the small bag of things that the leader handed to her and shook her head. "It's nothing. You don't have to give me this." Looking at the travel-worn people in the caravan, they didn't look like rich people. Why would she want to exploit them? "Take it, Mississippi. This is a small token of our Jean Mantang mercenary group's appreciation." "I can't take it anymore. I'll wake up and catch up on the second watch." Chapter 1706. "No, you must accept it." The captain of the Jean Mantang mercenary group was a man in his early 30s with a short black beard. At this time, he sincerely handed the small bag back to Xiaomu and earnestly said, "If it weren't for Miss saving us, we would all be dead by now. This is just a small token of appreciation from our Jean Mantang mercenary group. Please accept it. It's not much. It's just a small bag of ordinary food. Please don't refuse it anymore." Seeing the team leader's sincere expression, Xiaomu nodded and accepted the small pouch he handed over. At this moment, cries filled the mountain path. Due to the attack earlier, the caravan suffered quite a lot of casualties. He saw a middle-aged man holding a broken body and crying for a while. Then he stood up shakily and walked to the leader. He shouted at him angrily, "Captain Jean, didn't you say that we're about to reach Anka City and that there's no more danger? Why did my son die? Why didn't you save my son first? I hired your mercenary group to ensure our safety during the caravan's journey, but what did you do? You'd rather save a lowly woman than save my son? I want you to pay with your life. Give my son back, give him back." The middle-aged man wailed. There was a woman half kneeling next to him with her head drooped. She was trembling and hugging herself into a ball. It was clear that she was also in great shock earlier. It turned out that the middle-aged man's son was attacked at the same time as another woman in the caravan. Captain Jean did not say who he was going to save or not. He only saved the woman because she was closer to him, so it was more convenient for him to save her. The middle-aged man's son was killed in the sudden attack. The Jean Mantang mercenary group accepted a mission to protect the caravan, and the middle-aged man was considered a big boss who paid the majority of the money. In addition, the mercenary group also accepted a few small missions at the same time, including bringing some old weak women and children to Anka City. Back then, Captain Jean had discussed with the middle-aged man and said that he would waive a portion of his fees if he brought the old weak women and children with him, and the middle-aged man readily agreed. Now, he was telling him that he shouldn't save others but his son? But to Captain Jean, as long as it was a member of his caravan, he would treat everyone equally regardless of their status. However, the middle-aged man didn't think so. He thought that since he was the big boss who paid the money, the Jean Mantang mercenary group should first protect his and his son's safety. However, things didn't go as he wished. His son actually died in this attack, so he couldn't accept this fact. Just as the middle-aged man was about to pounce over and yell at Captain Jean, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest as he was sent flying with a kick. He landed heavily on the ground. The other survivors of the caravan were sobbing. When they turned their heads, they saw the middle-aged man being kicked to the ground. Looking up, They saw the little girl, who had just saved them, staring at the middle-aged man coldly. "He's been captured. Take care of him." After Arbor said this, he turned around and jumped onto Qing Wuan's back. He touched Qing Wuan's head and whispered, "Let's go." Chapter 1707. Qing Wuan flapped its wings and flew into the air. Arbor turned to look at Captain Jean and said indifferently, "If you don't want the remaining people to be wiped out, you should get rid of everything that needs to be dealt with without mercy." After speaking, Arbor sat on Qing Wuan and left without looking back. Captain Jean turned to look at the middle-aged man who was trembling all over. His face was deathly pale as he kept muttering, "No, no, no." While retreating step by step, Captain Jean sighed and waved his hand. Two of his teammates darted out from behind him and twisted the middle-aged man's arm. Actually, the attack this time had caused the Jean Mantang mercenary group to lose at least a third of their members. It was a huge blow to the Jean Mantang mercenary group. Originally, their Jean Mantang mercenary group was just a small 2-star mercenary group. As the leader, he only had the strength of a level 15 body cultivator. Once a body cultivator reached level 15, they were basically at their limit. Any higher would only increase their body's resistance to attacks. Unlike mystic cultivators, they could break through the spirit realm and take a step towards becoming a spirit master. The number of mystic cultivators and spirit masters on the 6 prefectures continent was definitely much higher than in the lower star field. However, although the people of the 6 prefectures continent lived in a place filled with spirit energy, this spirit energy was so thin that it was almost negligible. In reality, the only place with dense spirit energy that could speed up cultivation was a spirit realm. However, this kind of treasured land that could only be discovered by chance required one to encounter it. It wasn't as if any random person could find a spirit realm wherever they went. Therefore, when 3 spirit realms were dug out from Brinset Island, it was obvious that the 6 prefectures went crazy over it. The people who lived the most in the 6 prefectures continent were actually still normal people. The number of people on this continent was more than 100 times that of the lower star field Seacone planet. Relatively speaking, the number of mystic cultivators and spirit masters should naturally be more than 100 times that of Seacone planet. At first glance, mystic cultivators seemed to be everywhere on the 6 prefectures continent, but in reality, compared to the population of the entire continent, those who could become mystic cultivators were only 1 in 10,000 people. Those who could become mystic cultivators and enter the spirit realm were pitifully few. Arbor bid farewell to the caravan and sat on Qing Wuan to return to his academy. The trip back and forth didn't take long. Previously, she had said that she would need a day's time, so that she would have more time. In fact, the round trip only took 4 to 6 hours, and they would probably be back at the lava mountains in the afternoon. Master Silver, I seem to smell the scent of rainbow mushrooms." Arbor was slightly taken aback. He raised his hand and patted Qiuqiu's head. Rainbow mushroom? She had heard of the rainbow mushroom before. The 7-colored mushroom was a very special medicinal ingredient. It was the raw material for making the flying pill. Everyone knew that mystic cultivators above level 7 could fly on their own for a short period of time. But when flying, it would definitely consume his own profound energy. Therefore, no mystic cultivator would foolishly fly from the northern part of the country to the southern part. That was simply impossible. Most of the time, they would choose to use flying profound beasts to fly in their place. But the rainbow mushroom was a very strange thing. If a flight pill made from this material was a high-grade flight pill, its effect could be said to be incomparably good. Make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 1708. People who took the high-grade flying pill could fly for at least 4 hours unimpeded, and their flying speed was comparable to an eagle's. Arbor couldn't help but stare blankly. Qiuqiu's nose was too sensitive. "Where did you smell the 7-colored mushroom?" "Master, just now. I smelled the 7-colored mushroom in the small bag that the mercenary captain handed you." "Oh." Arbor stared blankly. When Captain Jean gave her the small bag, she casually put it in her inner world without checking what it was. At this time, she took the small bag out of her inner world and set up a defensive barrier around her body to block the fierce wind outside. Xiaomu opened the small food bag that Captain Jean gave her and poured out the contents, spreading them on the hem of her skirt. These were indeed small mushroom-like things. So Captain Jean was right. This was originally a small bag of food, and the amount wasn't much. It was just a small token of his appreciation. To Arbor, such a small bag of mushrooms was really not enough. On her paradise planet, all kinds of vegetables were now thriving, so there was naturally no shortage of mushrooms. Actually, she didn't need these things from him. But it wouldn't be good if she insisted on not accepting Captain Jin's food. Perhaps others would think that they owed her a big favor and feel uneasy all day. So when she saw Captain Jean like this, she reached out to take it in order to make him feel at ease. But she didn't expect that there would be a 7-colored mushroom mixed in with this pile of mushrooms. This 7-colored mushroom was actually a very strange thing. It was called a 7-colored mushroom. But in fact, it didn't emit 7-colored colors. It looked a bit like a shiitake mushroom, gray and dull. It was really hard to find clues mixed in with a small bag of mushrooms. Arbor took out the small 7-colored mushroom and handed it to Chiuchiu. Can this still prolong its life? When the men of the mercenary corps picked mushrooms, they definitely didn't treat them as treasures. They all just twisted and turned to pick them. Master, don't worry. This 7-colored mushroom is still easy to cultivate. It can't be weaker than spirit tea. Just keep it in our paradise planet. Arbor nodded and gave the mushroom to Sapling. This trip confirmed that Tan Fa was closely related to the Clear Sky Gate. In addition, he had also unexpectedly obtained a rainbow mushroom, which could be considered as quite a harvest. Arbor returned to the academy peak. Before he could return to his room, he was stopped by Qi Xianxian, who had heard the news. Jojo, where have you been? Why didn't you bring us along? Qi Xianxian tugged at her sleeve and said unhappily, I was worried about you. I'm fine. Arbor turned around and nodded at her. Go and deal with Tan Fa. Qi Xuanxuan's face was filled with surprise as she cried out. Is that the man who pulled the carriage and ran away from the teleportation formation? Arbor nodded. Are you all right then? Qi Xianxian was still worried. She grabbed her and looked her up and down. Seeing that she wasn't injured, she heaved a sigh of relief and lightly punched her. Why are you acting alone for such a big matter? Arbor blinked and shook his head. It's not a big matter. I can handle it myself. That won't do. Don't forget that we're in the same team. Naturally, we have to shoulder the responsibility together. Xianxian is right. Chapter 1709. The little fatty popped out from the small earthen hut next door and told Xiaomu sternly, Xiao, it's hard to avoid worrying people when you suddenly ran off on Qingwan. Don't do this again next time. Yes. No matter what, you have to discuss it with us first. We're teammates in the same boat. Upon hearing this, Xiaomu nodded seriously and said, Okay. Only then did Qi Xianxian smile. Reaching out, she grabbed her little hand and laughed. Here, it's a deal. You're not allowed to act alone next time. Arbor nodded obediently. Qi Xianxian tilted her head and smiled. Xiao, when you left, the two groups that were in a dilemma have already been divided. Other than the three of us, Duan Muqing is in the same team as us. As for Mata, ha. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but laugh loudly when she mentioned Mata's expression. What happened? Arbor was slightly startled and turned to look at Qi Xianxian, who was laughing nonstop. Qi Xianxian's laughter infected little fatty, who was standing at the side, and he started laughing as well. Mata and big brother Duanmu competed in martial arts. They said that the winner would stay. You know the result. Qi Xianxian laughed loudly. You didn't see it then. After Mata lost, he felt like the sky was falling down. He looked like he was about to cry. Xiaomu smiled faintly, an extremely faint smile on her lips. Qi Xuanxuan's eyes widened and she suddenly screamed, Jojo, you're smiling. Qi Xianxian suddenly reached out and cupped little fatty's face, revealing an exaggerated expression. Am I smiling? Let me see, let me see. Little Fatty hurried forward and asked anxiously. From what he remembered, this little guy who had been expressionless since the first time they met seemed to have never smiled. Xiaomu sighed softly as she looked at their exaggerated appearances in exasperation. Little did they know that behind them, Duanmu Qing was looking at the three of them chatting and laughing under the setting sun. He was in a daze. The sun was setting. Under the illumination of the red sun, the entire lava mountain range was enveloped in a sea of red. They couldn't tell if it was the heat emitting from the lava mountain range or the illumination from the setting sun. Duanmu Qing only felt that the smile of the girl in front of him was as if the fog had dissipated. It was also as if the spring breeze had brushed past the willows and melted the snow. Her appearance was extremely refined. In a trance, he seemed to see a faint shadow slowly walking over from the other side of the road. The shadow smiled at him and called faintly, "Brother Qing." Life at Arbor's top academy began. Every day was spent in a state of chaos. The instructors of the 5 departments took turns. Don't think that he only had to face one type of spirit faculty instructor. In fact, even if it was a wood spirit faculty instructor, all the students had to be present when he was teaching Duanmu Qing. Just like what the instructor said, even if you can't control this type of spiritual power, you have to understand it, or even conquer it. You have to grasp its weakness, so that in the future, you can quickly find the opponent's weakness and defeat it in one blow. Early in the morning, on the spacious arena of the Lava Mountain Ranges Academy peak, Xiaomu was wearing a light wood-colored short-sleeved shirt, and she had braided her long hair behind her head. He stretched out his hand, and a long transparent water spirit whip appeared. Chapter 17:10. Senior Brother Lu, please guide me. Arbor was fully focused when facing a level 2 spiritual master with a level 7 earth spirit. Junior Sister Qiao, please. The other party cupped his fists in greeting and nodded slightly. 2 figures flitted into the arena at an amazing speed. Once they attacked, spirit energy surged and the wind howled. Mata, who was squatting on the side watching the 2 fight, hugged his head and cried out pitifully. It's over, it's over, it's over. We're going to lose again. We're going to lose again. We're going to lose our points again. Hua Tao couldn't help but ask, why do you always lower your own prestige for others' sake? I'm not trying to lower my prestige. It's you, Senior Brother Hua Tao. When you fought with Junior Sister Qiao on the first day, didn't you get thrown out of the circle with one hand and couldn't even withstand a single move? Senior Brother Lu's cultivation is about the same as yours. Do you think he can win? Shut up. Hua Tao glared fiercely at Mata. Hey, no one will think you're a mute if you don't open your mouth. Besides, I merely underestimated my opponent that day. Can you not keep bringing that up? That day, he didn't even manage to withstand a single move from the little girl before being thrown out of the circle. This was practically a lifetime of black material. Senior Brother, I don't want to talk about it either. But look, Senior Brother Lu only has the strength to defend himself. Sigh, Junior Sister Qiao is very savage. Shoo shoo shoo. Hua Tao kicked him. Shut up. Even if we lose this round, there are still 3 more rounds. Even if we take a step back and say that Duanmu Qing wins, the other 2 brats absolutely aren't our match. No matter how you think about it, it's still a draw. What's the rush? A draw is even worse. Mata hugged his head and wailed. With his familiarity with the mentor's personalities, they absolutely wouldn't let them fight so easily. In the arena, the little girl's water spirit whip moved and lashed out one move after another at Senior Brother Lu. Senior Brother Lu and the mentors were all astonished. The little girl was merely a level 15 mystic cultivator who had yet to break through to the spiritual realm. It was already very shocking that she could barely use the power of the water spirit. But now, her spirit energy was actually endless. He clearly did not have a spiritual pulse, so how could his spiritual energy be stronger than his? Senior Martial Brother Lu somersaulted into the air and landed on a nearby rock. He cupped his fists and smiled. Junior Martial Sister Qiao, Senior Martial Brother has lost. Everyone focused their eyes and saw a faint shadow of a whip on Senior Brother Lu's chest. It was caused by the water spirit whip. Mata sighed. What should we do? Looks like it's really going to be a draw. He had a very bad premonition. After a draw, they would definitely suffer. The most pitiful thing was that he didn't know what the mentors would do to them. Jojo is the best. Qi Xianxian smiled and jumped up. She ran forward and held onto Arbor's arm. She smiled and said, Jojo, I knew you would win. Next match, Group 2 Ko Hongwen versus Group 1 Jiang Shaoxin. The little fatty immediately took out the double-headed hammer from his conscience and jumped onto the arena. He hollered, Senior brother Jiang, come. Jiang Shaoxin narrowed his eyes, and a black spear appeared in his hand. Spiritual energy floated around the spear, indicating that it was a spirit weapon. Junior martial brother Ko, be careful. The little fatty shouted. His left foot stomped hard on the ground. His entire body was like a small cannon as he pounced towards senior brother Jiang Shaoxin in front of him. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.